paper, Assad accuses Hamas of treachery over Syrian civil war stance. Bashar al-Assad accused of Hamas of treachery and hypocrisy over their alleged backing of the opposition in the Syrian civil war, August 10,
Yeah,
2023.
so let me tell you what happened because he said that speech also years ago. Last year, when they agreed everything with Hamas, there was a question to Assad. So what happened? He was talking about the history because he said it before. He did say, no, Hamas did betray Syria and we might never forgive them. That was years back. But he was getting explaining the history of the relationship with Hamas, and he mentioned that. And then later he said that last year when Hamas sent uh, a convoy, what do you call them, sent some representative and they talked with Assad and settled things. So it's not about now.
But
So,
brother, that's kind of besides the point.
just,
Like,
Mario,
Our boy, just on the second
I,
point, just I don't want to get too deep into. I don't think it just matters too much now because it's about the past. There was something else that our
I
boy.
think it does.
Why does it matter so
yes.
much, Dev?
So I just
Wait, he asked
hold
me a
on.
question, brother. Just hold on. Just hold
Yeah,
on.
Yeah, I'm gonna answer
yeah.
it
Hold on.
first. Just 1 minute. So I
So
think I think it is
basically it
important.
does matter because you're asking what the
Well,
axis is, and this is the axis. It's in shambles. There is no axis. The Houthis are geographically removed from the region. Hezbollah have drawn and redrawn red lines multiple times. Every time a line was crossed,
What were
they
they, our boy?
just
Can you tell us about some of these red lines that were? And
yeah they
Hadi, I know you
basically
disagree, so we'll give you the mic after. Go ahead.
they basically said that if there's a ground invasion, we're gonna intervene militarily
I
into
remember. Yeah.
northern Israel. They said if the civilian casualties keep increasing, then we're going to intervene. They said if Lebanon is targeted, we're going to intervene. And all of those three things
But they
happened.
did. But they did intervene. They did. But it's not.
No, they
Maybe
said
not.
they were going to storm the Israeli borders and actually make an incursion themselves into Israel. That never happened. They're just shooting towers and
Is
cameras.
he talking about Hezbollah?
I am talking about
Yes.
Hezbollah.
Yes. Yeah.
They never said anything like that. The only statement that came out of Hezbollah was Nasrallah spoke. There was no red lines drew by anyone. I don't know where you.
I don't. I don't. Yeah. Our
Al
so
boy.
Al
Hold on.
Jazeera reported this that
Dude, I don't. We
if
were on
just
this
hold
Do you
on a
side of
have?
second,
Mario since
just
day one.
Jihad,
Not
do you
once.
have?
you're not gonna let me
Yeah.
finish my sentence.
No,
Can
go
you?
ahead.
So
It's
the
just a back and forth,
Hezbollah,
Arrow. But go ahead, man.
yeah. Yeah, Hezbollah basically told the Egyptians that if there is a ground incursion into Gaza, then we're also gonna invade northern Israel, and that never happened.
Do you think Hezbollah will actually talk to Sisi and tell them
so
their plans?
They did. Al Jazeera reported this off
I
of
just,
Egyptian
dude,
officials.
listen. Everything that comes up Hezbollah, they come up Hezbollah directly. Those everything that you're talking about, we discussed them in the
No, but you
space
can't. You
before.
can't. But Hadi, you can't say. I don't.
Alex, just
Just 2 seconds, guys. Just I don't agree. I'm not saying I agree with the statement because I need to see the actual statement. But I would say like you can't say there's no group, no military that will be very open and transparent about all their strategies, all their threats. I'd say 90% of the discussions happen behind the scenes, and that
Yeah, but
doesn't
there
mean
was
that if Al Jazeera
the,
represented it, it's true. Yeah,
when
that's different. That one I wouldn't know.
yeah.
Yeah, that one I wouldn't know.
I mean, but that's the whole point I'm making. Hezbollah keeps drawing and redrawing lines. They keep backing out of statements. They're shying away from their duty. And if you watch the speech, of course you did. But if you're an Arabic speaker, you'd pick up on the words that Nasrallah said. He said this is a battle that Hamas and Gaza must win. He emphasized on it a battle being between Gaza and Israel, between Hamas and Israel, and nothing more than that.
I sense that
yeah,
same.
Mario. The
Good,
reason,
Ziv.
yeah, no, the reason why I said it's important is this. So for the last 3 weeks, for the entirety of this conversation, people have been opining on whether or not Syria, Hezbollah, Iran is going to get involved based on this axis. So the fact that they have not get involved, and people are now in the Arab world at least saying that, well, there is no axis, these red lines keep getting drawn and then crossed over, nothing happens, I think is important. And also, so I don't, I read that article where Assad in Al Arabiya, it doesn't mention anything about him saying, well, I'm talking about the past, right? So I think that people have a tendency to try to over contextualize things, right? So if he says that Hamas is treacherous, until he refutes something or offers a clarifying statement saying, no, I'm talking about the past, I'm going to take him at his word and, not trying, people try, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, but so in that article, he's not. It doesn't say, "Well, I'm speaking about the past, not the current." I think it's important to take people at their words until they say otherwise.
Yeah, but we're talking here about an article by Arabiya. Of course, they're gonna take a context and not say they always do that. But I'm saying,
Well,
they already met with Hamas after years of distancing themselves from them, and
so why hasn't he got involved yet then?
because it's not like that. Because they're gonna get involved.
I'll
Assad
tell
still
you
has
why
a
he's
war.
not getting involved. He's too busy
Assad,
bombing
Aravoy,
innocent
please, let me
civilians
interrupt
in
you.
Idlib
Aravoy,
right now.
just a second, please. It's not a war we just get involved. Assad still has his own war happening, and he still has his contacts. He's still maintaining, rebuilding ties with the Arab countries. That's a completely different issue. We're not going to get into with the Syria. Syria is a completely different thing. When you talk about the acts of
It
resistance,
wasn't Al Arabiya, it was Al Quds.
yeah. So let me, okay, give me the video of him saying it fully, and then I'll let you know. So when we talk about acts of resistance, you have Iran, their allies in Lebanon, Hezbollah. They have Syria. They have the groups in Iraq. They have the groups in Yemen. From Iraq, they also tried to fire missiles towards Israel. Yemen did the same thing. Hezbollah didn't draw any red lines yet, except yesterday when Nasrallah spoke. That's when you know where the red lines are, not from articles coming from Egypt or whatever. He said Hamas will not fall. That is the red line he's talking about. Other than that, we cannot speculate from articles and I don't know Quds.com and all that, because I can get a lot of conspiracy theories coming from that and red lines. And we had the same newspaper saying that Hamas is there, they do that, but there's a lot of speculation. We cannot get into details with every reports we read, not coming from official sources.
Okay, I'll
Yeah,
answer.
we'll go back to our boy Deb. I do want to, not sure where Kareem is, but I do want to go to some of our other speakers. Veripass and Ahmed and Alex, I'd love to get your thoughts, guys. I see we got Georgie. George, I've got other questions for you. So Veripass, your thoughts on the speech and your thoughts. Maybe I can talk to you about the missile that Hezbollah used today, because that's an interesting one. So Hezbollah today used a missile. That's the first time they use it in this war. If I get anything wrong, Hadi, let me know. But so there was a big explosion. We're trying to find out what it was. It turned out to be a Burkan missile, also called like a volcano missile, I think. So that's the first time they use it in this war. I'm not sure if it's the first time ever, but the first time in this war. It was created by Hezbollah. It's got a pretty large. It reaches the range reaches up to 2,000 meters. It's not nicknamed volcano. It carries explosive warheads weighing hundreds of kilos, and its substantial warhead can be loaded with various materials. So for me, that one was an interesting development a day after the speech. Not sure if it means something. Veripass, any initial thoughts on this?
So it's a again. Hey, thanks, Mario, for having me back. It's an escalation. They're going from the shoot and scoot to now we're going to start bringing out these bigger missiles for the tit for tat. I think again it is a tit for tat. We're up here. We knew Gallant was going up there as well. He's also making statements about up in the north. It's kind of what is to be expected. It's interesting that they're bringing out the bigger ones now. The other point is, I think you were asking me about the speech. A lot of people are actually now taking it. What did you expect them to say? He's saying two things in the same speech. He is telling America, listen, we had nothing to do with it. Please don't come and bomb us. And he is not saying please, but he knows the wrath that will come on him if they get into it. So, but he's also drawing a line saying, hey, look, we're prepared for this. So we know how to attack you. We're watching what's going on with the Houthis. We're watching what on. But, a lot of people are just taking it as a lot of bluster, how many times did he say we had nothing to do with it?
Yeah,
We had nothing to do with it.
that's what's interesting. Like he could have. So there's some things that he could have either said once and that's it, or just not said at all. But the fact that he repeated them is what made me really focus on that, and how there's going to be a long. It's going to be a long war.
I think the other point to make to this is I think what he's doing with the distancing, and you're seeing now Hamas heading, the leader of Hamas heading back into Iran. That announcement has been made as well. And we've been looking at it, right? Everybody's going, wow, all these Hamas operatives must have traveled to Iran for training or traveled up to Lebanon. I'll go to Ben. I can guarantee you that if more than 10 people that are on some sort of watch list or they have pictures start moving in a direction, everybody's paying attention. However, if you look at it the other way, it is very plausible that 3 trainers could show up from the IRGC through Iran and get into Gaza and start training people. So again, I think it's a distance. And also what we're hearing is that people are really upset in Hamas that they're not getting the props on the world stage that, everybody else or that they thought they would.
Hadi?
Yeah, just to highlight one thing, he didn't keep saying it. He said it once in one part of the speech.
Which one are you referring to? Which one are you referring to, Hadi?
They had nothing to do with it.
No,
he mentioned
that a few times. Let me just check. I'll get exactly what he said. But from
but that was in the part when he was focused on it. That's it. He didn't just leave it and then jump on it with another part. It was one part when he was focusing on it, and he was talking. He was
He said,
mostly
I'll give you the main
highlighting
quote. The quote: Operation
sure.
Al-Aqsa Flood was decided 100% Palestinian. Was decided 100% Palestinian. Its implementation was 100% Palestinian, and its owners hid it from everyone. He even went a step further. Didn't he also go a step further? Some people are trying to change the narrative and implicate others. I'm paraphrasing, but these are liars trying to stir trouble. This was a Palestinian mission.
Yeah, but that was.
But
Let me tell you. Yeah,
Hadi, let
sure.
me
Go
ask the
ahead. Go ahead.
question. What would you expect him to say, right? Look at the wrath that Israel has, regardless of where anybody's position is, the wrath that Israel is going after Hamas with. If he opened his mouth and said, yeah, we had him over for dinner and then we taught him how to do this, Israel would open up that front in about 3 seconds and, it would be a whole nother game.
Fair
So
cost.
you agree?
Okay, I get your point, but let me explain something. No one is hiding the fact that throughout the years, I'm not saying about this operation specifically, throughout the years that Hamas has contacts and armed and training by Iran and Hezbollah. Everyone knows that. No one, even Hamas doesn't deny that. Hezbollah doesn't deny that. Neither does Iran. When it comes to this operation specifically, they're trying, because there's a lot of talks trying to downplay Hamas, say Hamas are weak. They got an order from Iran. And in the Arab world, that's for the sentiments. This is important for a lot of people, especially for the Palestinians. They don't want to feel that they're being ordered. So he said it in the context that 100% Palestinian as a form of boosting nationalism in Palestine, boosting this what do you call it, this pride that Hamas is capable, Hamas is strong, the Palestinians can defend themselves, the Palestinians can do operations, even if we had them trained before for a lot of things. But this was 100% a Palestinian act. They didn't need anyone to help them with. This is exactly what he meant from his perspective, and to the people he sent the message to the supporters. He did not say oh, they did
Fair
that,
enough.
they're alone. This is what I'm trying to explain.
What do you think, Ahmed?
Yeah. So, well, statements can have a number of purposes, a number of functions, a number of goals. So I agree with Hadi on that, because as an Arab listening to the speech in Arabic, that's how it came across. However, I would also agree, it's like, guys, you can't come after us. We weren't part of this, from a kind of, not giving an excuse for Israel to bomb Hezbollah or any other country like the US bombing Hezbollah, or even, hitting Iran as well. But this new missile thing, I think it's, again, a game of it's a game. It's, this is what we've got. You don't know what else we've got. So it's like, stay away. It's part of the psychological war. One missile is not going to do much, just but sort of militarily. However, there is the game, the sort of psychological games being played, and there is that now, because especially in Israel, after what happened on the 7th of October, nobody was expecting that. So next minute, I'm sure many Israelis, politicians and the public, are thinking, oh, what's going to come at us next? And that's one of the reasons why the US and the UK are involved in sending ships, and for various different reasons. But what could happen? Because we keep going on about whether a war could be triggered regionally. Nobody actually knows. Nobody actually knows. We've, from history, World War I, World War II. Nobody knew that was actually how it's going to start. And as much as intelligence officials kind of study these things and do reports, it doesn't always go the way they think it is.
True, but there's indicators, man. Like what we can say we know, and I don't know if you disagree with this, but we know if there's going to be a war between Hezbollah and Israel is going to be significantly harsher than it was in 2006, considering what happened on October 7th, for example. We know that there will not. They're almost impossible for them to not go all the way with Hamas after everything they've said.
Well,
I'm gonna stick my neck out again and say about the Arab countries, as much as they're kind of quiet at the moment. I don't know if anybody heard the statement by so yesterday, the Libyan ambassador representing the Arab group and the Organization of Islamic Conference. That's what it's called. I was going to say states, OIC. Yesterday, his statement with all the Arab and Islamic ambassadors behind him was quite strong. Now, yes, okay, it was only at ambassadorial level, but yeah,
Whose statement?
And he actually said,
who?
So yesterday, the Libyan ambassador, it was at the UN, speaking on behalf of the Arab ambassadors who are behind him and the organization of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic States Conference. I always get confused, but it's the OIC.
Islamic Union.
No, not anymore. I'm sure it's conference, OIC. OIC.
Okay.
Anyway, so so he was saying, look, we've put our differences aside. I'll send you it. I'll send you the link. I'll send the link to his actual. I'll send you it. He said we put our differences aside. He was speaking in English, by the way, and not in Arabic, which was interesting as well, because he usually does speak in Arabic when he.
So what's the indication of that statement, Ahmed? I just want to understand.
No, what I'm saying is that we mustn't forget the Arab countries are talking to each other, and Islamic countries are talking to each other, because it's got to a state where I don't think what's happened in Gaza has never happened before. We've seen a number of wars, but never to this extent. And also, what people are able to see, whereas before people weren't able to see. Let's put it that way, because of modern stuff.
But Ahmed, the question that I have, and we have some new speakers here like Zumas, but Alex, the question that I have for you is that I understand if they mention briefly, hey, we had nothing to do with October 7th. I'd be like, all right, cool. Maybe they're saying the truth. They had nothing to do with it. But for them to say, let me read out what they said. I've got the quote here. Absolute secrecy is what ensued the brilliant success of the October 7th operation through the factor of surprise. Cool. All right, that's good. He said it's absolute secrecy. He said it once. Everyone heard it. Move away. Next, Operation Al-Aqsa Flood was decided 100% Palestinian. Its implementation was 100% Palestinian, and its owners hid it from everyone. Next, the owners of the operation hid it from Palestinian factions and the resistance axis movements, again, which were not bothered by its concealment. Next, absolute secrecy ensued the brilliant success of the operation through the factor of astonishing surprise. Again, concealing the October 7th operation has absolutely no effect on any of the resistance fronts. So I'm just curious if there's any more, but I think this is it. No, it continues. Hold on. The decisions made. Oh no, that's talking about himself. This is it. So there's like 5 statements here talking about the secrecy of October 7th event.
Yeah, but Mario, just a second. When he said it, like I said, he said it in one small part, and if you listen to it in Arabic, it had different. When you translate in English, they all look the same, but they had a meaning. They're behind each other. One specific statement in one part. And by the way, I think Brian wants to speak, but I can't raise his hand.
I know.
In one part. So that's why if you translate to English and you put them like that in a statement, it feels like, oh, he kept talking about it, but it's not the case at all.
Yeah. Alex, I don't know how mistranslation. I'm just reading the translation. Seems pretty accurate. I don't know what in Arabic would mean when he says the same thing a million times. 100% Palestinian, 100% Palestinian. They hid it from everyone. They hid it from the resistance.
Mario, I've sent you and Hadi via your DM a interview that was published with Bashar al-Assad, and if you go to the 2-minute and 53-second mark, you will see that he's basically disparaging Hamas. That's number one. Number two is, so just to, I think it's Ahmed's point. Yes, I can see his point in saying that Israel is worrying about, well, what's going to happen next. But I also think that, touching back on the difference between 2006, if something happens with HEZBOLLAH this time, I do take Yoav Galan's word seriously, that it will be not only HEZBOLLAH, but Beirut that is bombed. I think that's important. And thirdly, as to what the Libyan ambassador says, I think Libya has some soul searching to do within the confines of their own border. I don't take it very seriously.
Alex, sorry, just going to stop there. I just said, no, sorry, just go back to that, because I've just found the post. It's the Libya statement today as chair of the Arab group during the joint press conference of OIC. So please don't start all this Libya business. Just have a bit of respect, okay? I'm not talking about Libyan ambassador.
What did I say? What did I say that was disrespectful?
Yeah, because you're saying Libya has its own. He was talking as chair of the Arab group, and he had the group behind him. Now, if you don't want to respect that, that's absolutely up to you. But
what's the exact quote, Ahmed?
So I'm saying, well, it was the speech, it was the statement, and I'll send you the link.
But I don't understand what's such a big deal about the statement. Okay, they're talking together, but is there a specific part of the statement?
All I said, yeah. So all I said to you is that the Arab countries are speaking to each other, as well as the OIC. Okay, the organization.
But why is that? But Ahmed, with all respect, why is that?
That's not the issue. That is not the issue. If you want to have a go and say it's not important, that's fair enough. But I'm not having this. Libya has got its own issue stuff. It wasn't about Libya. It's not about Libya. Now, if I
Okay.
said
Well,
Libya
no,
said
I
this,
think it
fair
is.
enough.
I think it is a good
Yeah.
point, right? I mean,
No,
listen,
it
Libya
isn't.
can say what
It's
they
not about
want.
Libya.
So,
He is
may
not
I please
talking on
finish? No,
behalf of
Ahmed,
Libya.
you made a statement.
No,
I'm good.
because
Ahmed, you made a statement, and I'm going to
yeah,
counter it.
no,
I hear what you're saying. I'm not.
no. You
No,
took it completely
Ahmed.
wrong.
Okay, what? No. I do. I am capable of
You
listening.
said Libya.
I heard what you said.
Yeah, so I'll let you. So Ahmed,
not-
yeah.
Could you
So
stop, could you
yeah,
stop
go.
interrupting?
All right, go ahead,
So
Ahmed,
what I'm saying
quickly.
is,
Go ahead,
he's not speaking on behalf of Libya. Even his tweet is Libya statement today as chair of the Arab group during the joint press conference of OIC in New York on the latest developments in Gaza. You want to disregard it, fair enough, but don't start saying it's about Libya. It might have been the Moroccan guy who read it out. So let's not do that, okay? That's what I'm trying to say.
Right, and what I'm saying is, I'm not interested in what any statements that
You
any
cannot be
joint
interested
press.
in whatever you like.
Can I
Ben,
finish
okay?
my point, Ahmed?
Yeah.
You're being very testy today, and I understand.
I've had enough of your interrupting.
You made. What did you just say?
Ahmed, I think you said
I've
you're.
had enough of your interrupting all the time. You always
Well,
interrupt.
I'm
let's
up
go,
here
let's
as the
go.
co-host, right?
Let's go.
No. I'd like to finish my point.
Yeah,
I'd
of
like
course.
to
I was
finish
going
my
to
point.
give you the mic. Go ahead, Zev. Go ahead.
Yeah, so listen, my point is this. I'm not interested personally, just from a different perspective, right? My perspective and your perspective are not monolithic. What I am saying in counter to your point is I'm not interested in what any of this group says. I will make my determinations, my calculations based on the facts of the grounds and what the major enemies of Israel say. The major enemies of
enough.
Israel are
I
Hezbollah,
agree.
Assad, and Iran. And all of those people have seemed to be backed right down, waving a white flag saying, please don't come bomb us. It's just that simple.
If you said that, I'm okay with that. I agree. You know, I can even take that because actually, a lot of Arabs are having a go at the Arab countries. I've got no problem with that. But you said it's about Libya having its own problems. I'm saying it's nothing to do with Libya. He spoke as chair of the group. That's what I'm saying. So I do. Forget Libya. I didn't say. Yeah.
Okay. I do want to go to Gilad. Gilad, I heard, and I'll go to Zumas afterwards, and Brian will go to you. One thing I've heard is Israel considering, and I've heard a lot of rumors and people have been saying it for a while, Israel considering a preemptive strike. Now, we do know that military personnel did talk. I think do you remember, Zev? We had the military side of the military personnel, I can't remember if a commander who it was, that sent a request to the cabinet or some government official requesting permission to preemptively strike Hezbollah. Do you remember that, Zev, before we go to Gilad?
Yeah, that was I believe Yoav Gantz and
Gallant. It was Gallant. It was
yeah,
Gallant.
it was Gallant.
It was Gallant.
Gallant himself sent that request?
He did it. So it was in a meeting with Blinken and Bibi. I'm sorry, Ben. It was in a meeting with Bibi and Blinken, and he said, "I want to go do it." And according to the readout, is Netanyahu and Blinken said, "Don't do it before the president gets here."
Right, but I don't remember the exact reporting of that. But I mean, I'm sure it's true. But I still think that there is a, the percentages are probably higher than 50, I suppose. We'll say it's 50-50 to be safe. Why not? I can't lose. That you may see a preemptive strike on Hezbollah. I do think that. I do think that there are those, including Netanyahu, who are looking around the region and saying, look, we have the Americans here. And quietly, the Americans want Hezbollah gone too, okay? If they can reach some type of quiet agreement with, that even Syria stays out of it and Iran's clearly going to stay out of it, if they can get rid of Hezbollah, they're cognizant of the fact that they see who's in the region, they see the firepower.
I find that.
So that's
I think this kind of makes more sense if you look into Nasrallah's statement, which I know some, including Hadi, disagree, but which I find to be, very de-escalatory, like the opposite of what many people feared. That would make sense if they're worried about a potential Israeli strike, because that would be the strategic thing to do to avoid them getting into a war. So he's made a statement. He was clear that he doesn't want escalation. Actually, I want to go to Alex before I go to you, Gilad, because I know Alex, I was trying to go to you earlier. Alex, your thoughts on the statement itself, obviously the comments I've just made. Now I'm going to go to Gilad to get his thoughts on the sentiment in Israel and the likelihood of a preemptive strike. Alex?
Sure, no problem. Thanks again for having me. I'll give you a very short, succinct answer, and then I'll explain the back end of it. You can cut me off when you need to. So, Hezbollah is still sitting on a stockpile of 120 to 150,000 missiles and rockets that are vast majority capable of striking both Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. So they are a legitimate force and something to be dealt with. So the comments that I'm about to make are related to the speech, not the institution itself, because they are still absolutely a power and a threat to be dealt with. The speech was weak. At the end of the day, I mean, he backed off, hey, this wasn't us. We weren't involved. You need to be listening to your own groups. We're not responsible for telling everybody else what to do. By the way, all the Arab states, where are you guys? What are you doing? You should be using your power and your weight to be calling for a ceasefire. What are you doing? And this is a long game. We're not going to get you now, but we have the ability to take this, for the long stretch, and that this won't, this is far from over. I mean, if I'm going to give you a cliche movie analogy, this is when the kid gets their ass kicked and walks away from the fight and is still screaming, I'll get you, I'll get you tomorrow, like one of those routines. So, I mean, they've been getting beat up by members of Hamas publicly that have been, leaders who have been on tape basically saying, where are you? We expected more from you. And so, yes, I expected more fire and brimstone too. And I do think that that is a result of deterrence. And it's not just simply having the U.S. carriers off the coast and everything else. Let's not forget, while there may be a much more pro-Hezbollah government that's in Lebanon now, the country is broke. It is very different than 2006. The country is in no condition to be sustaining some sort of large war fighting Israel that's there. And so I think that plays to the fact that Hezbollah, doesn't want to do this right now. They don't want to see the escalation. And like I just mentioned, I think the last time we had spoken, there's still an unresolved, Iran nuclear problem that needs to get dealt with at some point, and hopefully through diplomatic means. That's not done with. And so if Hamas is going to be, quote, demilitarized, again, whether anybody thinks that's successful or not, it's a different story. For the purpose of this discussion, let's assume that everything that's been stated was accurate, right? They're going to go into Gaza City. The operation is starting. They may move to the south afterwards. They get all the weapons. You're not going to defeat the ideology. You're not going to get all the small arms. That's never going to happen. That's not realistic, right? There's still going to be elements of Hamas or Hamas movement around. That's unrealistic thinking. And that's the reason I think that the goal was very clearly stated as demilitarizing Hamas. Your only main proxy in the region at that point is Hezbollah. Yes, you have the resistance movements in Iraq and here and there, and they're capable of conducting some attacks on U.S. bases. But they are not Hezbollah by any means in terms of capabilities, training, discipline, size, armament, non-existent, nowhere near that. And Iran is not stupid as an actor, right? They understand that there are other things that are still going on, and that is a reserve capability that's essentially being held in reserve right now, just like any other uniformed army would do before they're going to commit the main force, right? Hamas is the main force right now. They're watching what's going on the ground, as you mentioned. They've got this force in reserve. And what do? But I also hear Zev's point as well, and I think it's valid because we've heard the leaks coming out of the war cabinet, where there was discussion about going after Hezbollah now, because again, you've got two groups that have called for Israel to basically be eradicated, the same with Iran as a state, but they haven't acted as a state to act on those goals, only through proxies. So if you saw what happened on October 7th with Hamas, which is nowhere near as big or as capable as what Hezbollah is, from that perspective, while you have some sympathy there and you have U.S. firepower in the region, do you go after them? I think that debate actually did happen. I do believe the reports that came out. But I also believe that nobody wants to see a wider escalation as well. So, I mean, Hezbollah is still a long-term question, both for Iran to decide what they're going to ask them to do on their behalf in light of potential nuclear problems, and then for Israel to determine for their own future security. Are you going to continue to leave a threat on your northern border that's much more capable than a force that acted independently by all accounts, that was more successful than anyone else has been in targeting and killing Jews in a single day since the Holocaust? Those are all variables that are in the decision-making equation. I still put it at 50-50 whether they get involved. This ground war is like literally just still getting started on the outskirts of Gaza City. We haven't seen the main fighting really start in the
Surprising,
urban environment.
Alex. You're putting it at 50-50 after this as well.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, there were comments made by the other speakers, and I think they're right. If the humanitarian situation gets really, really bad, civilian casualties still go through the roof, and if there's any massive escalation and fighting inside there, right, Israel gets bogged down, and there's a lot of fighting that goes on. Yeah, it's a possibility.
Do you think they will let Hamas die? Do you think they'll let Israel eradicate Hamas to as much as possible?
Well, it's hard to say, right? They make that statement, but what are they actually going to do in response, right? Like they're going to Israel's trying to demilitarize, right? Again, is the term that was used. So they're going to go through house to house, try to destroy all the weapons, everything else. You're not going to destroy the group. Are they going? I mean, what are they going to do? They really only have one choice, right? We've already talked about the geography up north. They're not going to try some massive ground invasion. There's a several mile buffer. Israel's mobilized all the troops up north. You got the carriers off the coast. It's not a realistic situation to see a major ground incursion that's going to be successful into northern Israel. They are sitting on a boatload of rockets and missiles that could come raining down on Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, though. That's entirely possible. But the repercussions from doing that are very clear. If Israel becomes overwhelmed with the size and number of the rockets and missiles that are coming in, does the U.S. then get involved with the carriers off the coast? entirely possible, right? If that's in order to prevent the state from sort of, having that problem. And again, we're not going to get into ridiculous scenarios, and I'm not going to feed the conspiracy theorists. But at the end of the day, Israel is still sitting on a stockpile of 80 to 200 nuclear weapons that they don't acknowledge, many of them tactical, which was specifically developed as a means of deterrence to prevent neighboring Arab states back when there was a bigger threat from invading. If there is an existential threat to the state of Israel, it is a last option, but they are also the only ones in the region with that, and that's not lost on anybody who's involved here.
Hadi, I don't know if you have a quick
Absolutely.
Hadi response to what was to what Alex said before we go to Gilad.
Hey Mario, give me 10 minutes because I'm
Yeah,
gonna
sure.
drive and I'll
Gilad,
come
I
back.
want to go to question to you then, Gilad, without the response. The question is about Israel. Any likelihood of a preemptive strike by Israel? Because the sentiment is there. Like people that are, I wouldn't call them warmongers that I've spoken to behind the scenes. They'd be like, hey, since we're at it, let's get rid of Hezbollah as well.
Hi Mario, and again, thank you for having me again. That's a very interesting question, and I think that what you just said about the sentiment, that's kind of what crossed my mind throughout what I'm hearing. And I also think that, I'm not an expert to Hezbollah, and so, but I think that that was kind of the reaction to the sentiments in Israel. I cannot remember such sentiment since 73. So at least 50 years, you couldn't see those kind of sentiments within the Israeli society. And I'm talking about, friends which are really, I wouldn't say from the very far left, but really from the left side of the political map in Israel. So, and still, I would yet say that the focus, to my best of understanding, is Hamas. The focus is to go in and try to put them physically, not as ideology. I agree with whoever's saying you cannot kill ideology, but physically to go in. Of course, we shouldn't forget the hostages situation. Just one more comment. So going back to your question, very, very difficult to guess. We understand the threat, we understand what's happening in the north, but it's very difficult for me, even as an Israeli, to determine whether that's going to happen. So I would probably stick with your 50-50. And I just one more comment. Israel did not ask the US or any other military ships to be around or close to shore. I just wanted to make sure that this is clarified. I heard a few
They
comments.
haven't publicly, but they haven't publicly. I'll be surprised if they didn't ask that privately. I'd be very surprised if the
I
US said
I
that.
would be surprised. I would be surprised if they did ask for it.
Exactly, Mario. I think we have to raise this as an issue as well, just for the sake of the debate here. Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate it, Gilad.
And Mario,
Zev, hold on,
one last
Zev.
quick thing,
Do you
Mario.
think Israel didn't ask for those two warships, Zev?
I'm more than convinced that they didn't ask. I think it was a goodwill gesture and also a tactical decision by the allies of Israel. I think, what Israel probably would have preferred is to have no material support, but also not to have their hands zip tied. That's just my own gut feeling. I don't think that Israel in any way asked, "Oh, please send these ships." I think that the U.S. and the British military echelon decided it would be a good, not only a goodwill gesture and a de-escalatory gesture and a show of strength. In terms of before we go to Zumas, there's a very interesting point was made, right, as to whether or not Hezbollah will let Hamas die. There's one thing that's common throughout every human being, every religion, every ideology, every political sphere, and that's self-preservation. Okay? When it comes down to it, everybody and every organization is going to look to self-preservation, even if it means the extinction of a political ally, a religious ally. Nobody wants to go down, with the ship, so to speak, when it comes to these types of groups, right? They have their own futures in mind. They have their own power considerations in mind, the financial considerations in mind. They don't want to be eradicated. And I do think that, if I think that they would be perfectly fine letting Hamas fall, because Hamas is falling right now.
Yeah, Xumas, I want to go to you, and then we'll go to Brian afterwards. Eyal, we'll go to you in a bit. Can you just not unmute, please, because a lot of echo as always, please. I appreciate it. Grimace, want to get your thoughts, and I saw your tweet as well saying that this rocket was not what people say it is. I've spoken to a few military experts who did point to that same conclusion, that it is the volcano missile. But would love to get your thoughts on the speech and where we're at now, especially with the clashes that happened on the border today.
Yeah, greetings to everyone. So in terms of the speech, and you guys have discussed this matter a lot, and I think there's some context missing. It's very important, first of all, to understand that Hezbollah, since its ceasefire with Israel, has pledged a lot and done a lot to keep the peace with Israel and the calm. One of the things that Hezbollah normally does is that any sort of attacks toward Israel from originating from its borders is reported to the UN interim forces in Lebanon. In terms of the speech, Hezbollah came out, and before that, we had speeches from Hamas and Iran, which Hamas themselves said there were no coordination with other quote unquote axis of resistance groups. Iran said there was nothing; they had nothing to do with the Al Aqsa flood operation. Nasrallah came out; he said the same thing, and that's how every single most of the Arab world interpreted it. So I don't understand why there's some people who's trying to spin this around and say, in Arabic this means something else. Well, I'm a fluent Arabic speaker. A lot of people here are, and we can tell you the same thing. There's no language in the world where you say the same thing 5-6 times and it suddenly changes meaning. That's not how it works. In terms of Hezbollah has no interest in escalating this conflict. They are not interested in participating in the war. That's why they're engaged in tower games right now. Most of their operations has been limited to attacking communication towers, which they're marketing to their followers as $30 billion equipment that they're blowing up. Since when is UHF beacons and radars and thermal cameras worth $30 billion? They will never cost that amount. So what Hezbollah is doing is that they need to show to their followers and supporters, in order to maintain legitimacy, they need to show, well, we're still relevant, we have to do something, and so therefore they do what they do. In reality, Gaza is alone. Iran will not interfere. Iran will not intervene. Hezbollah will not intervene. The Iraqi resistance there's no such thing as an Iraqi resistance. The Iraqi resistance was made by the United States. The United States, under Iraqi Liberation Act in 1998, put these people in power. They brought them to power in Iraq. There's no such thing as Iraqi resistance. In Syria, they're busy. Syria has been getting bombed by Israel so many times, and they haven't responded. Their comment over and over is, we will respond at a appropriate time and place. When is that time and place? That has never took place. Nobody knows what the appropriate time and place is. It's the same thing for Nasrallah. Iran was negotiating with the United States, sorry, a month, 2 months ago. We had the whole hostage release money thing, and then that thing broke off. Iran is interested in keeping that deal. They will not be going anywhere. However, there is, at the same time, there's understanding that Iran needs to show something in order to keep its legitimacy. That's why we're seeing this media game, this media campaign, this PR game. While in reality, there's nothing to be done. What I expect to happen is we're going to see continuous strikes at towers in North Israel, quote unquote, and South Lebanon, and that's all that's going to happen.
The likelihood, and I'd love to get Hadi or Hoshar to kind of respond to what you've said. But in your opinion, what is the likelihood of Hezbollah getting involved after hearing that speech?
There is.
And when I start getting involved, going all in.
Yeah, there's absolutely 0% chance of Hezbollah getting involved. There's no possible way Hezbollah is getting involved in this war. They are making excuse after excuse. If you watch their media, if you watch how they talk to their followers, they're producing excuse after excuse. All of a sudden, Samir Jaja from the Lebanese forces, the Christian party in Lebanon, he's becoming elevated into becoming a threat. When right after the Ta'if agreement, Hezbollah was the only armed group in Lebanon that did not disarm. Every single other group has no arms. Suddenly, these groups are now a threat to Hezbollah. That's what their media wants you to believe. That's what
who said that the other groups have become a threat? Who said that the Lebanese forces are a threat?
So Samir Jaja made a speech on the day that Nasrallah came out and made a speech. He said, "We don't want Nasrallah or Hezbollah to drag us into a war." And then certain media persons were back and forth, and there was a lot of big back and forth on social media about this. And this whole thing was elevated to something it's not. So the Lebanese
about the weapons, did they mention anything about weapons, or you're just saying their rhetoric?
No.
There's a lot of resistance against Hezbollah.
Yeah. So there was no mention of direct weapons from the Lebanese forces themselves. They didn't threaten with weapons. However, it gets interpreted by other political analysts as if the Lebanese forces will take up arms and there will be civil war in Lebanon. That's not the case. The Lebanese forces has no arms. After the Taif agreement, they all disarmed except Hezbollah.
Yeah, I understand. I will go to Brian to get his thoughts on what
I
was
mean,
said. But
before you go, I want to add something to what Zuma said. In 2001, 2002, according to Al-Quds Post, it's a Palestinian paper. Iran has cut off all funding, financial funding to Hamas. Second,
hold on, that's the
I
big
want to
one.
comment
Sorry,
on something.
Arab. When was that?
In 2001, 2002,
Oh, that's but that's
I-24
things.
news.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
22 years ago. Things changed a lot since then.
yeah. They've cut off the financial support to Hamas since. It's from a Palestinian news outlets. Anyways, my second point is I want to talk about Hezbollah. They weren't really involved since October 7th or October 8th, as Nasrallah said. That's actually false. The group that were coming into Israel that were firing rockets were Hamas cells and Islamic Jihad cells, and these attacks were being reported on their official pages in Telegram. And the only reason Hezbollah got involved is when the IDF Air Force bombed Hezbollah, and that's why they got kind of
Yeah.
dragged into this.
So Hadi,
Yeah, they didn't really.
Hadi, are you there yet, or are you still driving?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay. So did you hear what Zumas and Araboid said?
Yeah, I heard, but there's a lot, and I'm
Yeah.
not gonna go into every detail they
Let's.
said
I want to get
because
your
there's
thoughts. I know you're
actually.
probably boiling in the background.
No, I'm not boiling at all because we've been hearing the same rhetoric and conspiracy theories for a while, especially from
Which one?
Ba'athist side in Iraq.
Which history theories?
A lot of things that Hezbollah is not doing anything, and they don't. Sometimes they go to the extent that Hezbollah had this secret deal with Israel for them not to escalate and all that. But what I want to say first, let's go to the Jaja thing. It's completely irrelevant to everything we're talking about because every time he posted something on Twitter, a lot of supporters from all sides think every time a Lebanese politician tweets something, the other side just takes it to another level. It's just Twitter thing. It's just social media. It had nothing to do with any official statements from anyone. That's one. Two, when it comes to Hezbollah and Iraq and all that, the thing is, I mean, I'm alone in the space against everyone, but let's go. The thing is, I know where people come from. I understand sometimes where people come from when it comes to saying they're not doing anything, they're not doing that, they're silent. This is we're not playing a game here. If we're really convinced that they want to distance themselves and they don't want to attack and they don't want to do all that, you would not have seen any attacks on the borders, any mobilization from different countries, any missiles fired from Iraq, any missiles fired from Yemen, any Hezbollah. Hezbollah already lost 60 soldiers. I don't think they're doing that just to play games. They're using missiles, they're firing, they're making fun now of them targeting cameras and all that, but we know how this is serious, and Israeli reports said they're serious probably for future attacks because they are watching the whole south with those cameras and spying devices. At the same time, they targeted tanks, they targeted Israeli soldiers directly, and every single attack was videoed and they showed it. It's not just like they're claiming it.
I have some interesting
Another
breaking
point.
news just happened now. According to AP,
Well,
Agence France Presse, that's a different one. There's Biden announces progress on reaching a humanitarian truce in the war between Israel and Hamas. If there's some sort of truce,
I have a question on that.
Go ahead.
Maybe Alex can respond. Actually, I also want to respond to Alex before what he said. Uh, Actually, Alex, when he speaks, he speaks it very eloquently and he has facts. And even though his position is different than mine, he said it because he was 50-50. Understand, Alex, everything you said, but I just want to ask you about something. I know you don't believe
Sure,
that
brother.
Hezbollah is capable of invading because of all deployments and all that, but don't you believe that they have other capabilities? For example, the ballistic missiles and all that. They don't have to invade. And do you believe at
Yes.
some point, because there were talks that Hezbollah wants to take the next war different than 2006? They don't want to take it to the extent of civilians and destructions and all that. I think maybe new rules of engagement where a battle happens, but on the northern borders and the southern borders, they don't go beyond that because it will be destructive for both sides, to be honest. Let's
Yes.
face it.
I firmly agree with you 100%. And I think that's what we talked about the other day as well. I think if there's going to be an escalation, like I was saying, that's why I don't think there'll be a ground incursion right now. It would be missiles and rockets, and they have a very large and what would be a very effective, cache of 120 to 150,000 missiles by all accounts. And that's why when people make comments like dismissing Hezbollah as a force, that's a sadly mistaken position to take, because if they were to unleash, it would be a significant problem. And that is the reason that we're having this conversation in the first place, right? About whether or not Israel is going to have a preemptive strike or whether they don't. and whether Hezbollah is going to get involved or not, which is more of a question of strategy than capability, because they certainly do have that, as you mentioned. So, yeah, I think you're 100% right. But I do, if Mario, if you will indulge me just for a second, because somebody tagged you and I in a post related to the last remarks I made. No one justified the use of any nuclear weapons, and the characterization in the post that you and I were tagged in is not even close to what we just said, nor is it accurate. What I said was that there's allegedly, again, they haven't admitted it, 80 to 200 nuclear weapons that supposedly exist, and their purpose for existence in terms of why they were created was allegedly to deal with any existential threats to Israel after they were invaded by neighboring countries a number of times. And that's it. That's not a justification. That's literally just an explanation of the situation and what's there. Justify would say that they'd be right in blowing up people and using weapons. That's not what any of us said in here. And stating that and then tagging the two of us, given the size of the audience from the individuals, is incredibly irresponsible, because that's not what was said.
So, and also just kind of points out for anyone listening that the comment section in the bottom right corner, that purple circle, we check it. You just saw an example here of Alex checking it. I do want to point out another thing as well. I appreciate you clarifying that, Alex. Before you jump in, Zev, and I want to go back to Hadi. There's the.
Well, sorry, I thought I was going to be up.
Oh, you will, Brian. Yes, I do want to mention.
We can go to Brian and then I can go.
Yeah, go ahead. Just 2 seconds, guys. 2 seconds. There is an ongoing hostage situation right now in Hamburg Airport. We're watching to see any details as an armed individual breached the security barrier at Hamburg Airport, leading to the suspension of air traffic. State and federal police have been dispatched. The man is reportedly holding 2 children hostage in his vehicle. He has also allegedly set multiple fires within the airport area and fired shots from his car. I know Hamburg Airport really well. I don't know how he managed to get in and do all this. Just one man be able to breach the security barrier, set up fires, and still have 2 hostages in his vehicle. I'm not sure how that worked out. I'd be interested to get more details. But the airport has been closed. All flights have been, takeoffs and landings stopped in Hamburg Airport due to the hostage situation that just came in right now as well. So there's a hostage situation. I don't think it relates to the current conflict in any way, because on the other side, there is a lot of concern in the US around an increase. I think there's an intelligence, someone from the intelligence, I don't think it was the CIA. I can't remember who it was. I'll try to find the quote. But there's an increasing concern of terrorist attacks or risk of terrorist attacks in the US. So I don't think this is related to that, but it's worth mentioning. Brian, go ahead. And Brian, if you know who made those statements today about the increasing threat of terrorism among US enemies, it would be good if you can point that out.
Just to address that, excuse me, sorry, just to address that real quick, since he was asking me, earlier, the head of the FBI had been saying this, and DHS so there's been a steady stream coming from the Biden administration from different security officials that they expect more terrorist attacks because of this situation in the Middle East. They expect more anti-Muslim attacks and anti-Semitic attacks, and it's very sad that that's happening. So if that addresses your concern there, it's a constant thing. Is it okay if I move on to something else, or did you want to ask somebody else about that as well?
Move on.
Thank you, sir. Okay. So, and again, I really appreciate this forum, and you guys really try hard to let different voices be heard. So when you look at this speech, what I tweeted right at the beginning of Nasrallah's speech was that, quote, "No declaration of war, lots of ginning people up, incitement and threats, but not going to be a declaration of war or a game changer, just going to be massive posturing to pressure Israeli West Saudis to win over base and Sunni Arab public opinion," end quote. And that's, I think I pretty much nailed it, because what I listened to with your excellent translator here was an hour of kabuki posturing theater where, again, there's actually some constructive things I think that were done. There's 2 different ways to look at this, and I look at both. But pretend you're Palestinian, pretend you're Hamas, pretend you're part of the people who really want to see other people aid Hamas or at least aid Gaza and fight against Israel. You didn't get anything. This is like when Putin had that conference with China, and China didn't promise anything concrete, didn't promise any weapons. You were listening for specific steps that Hezbollah is going to take in response to specific things, and you got nothing. You got a lot of hot air. You got a lot of praising the martyrs and this and that. And honestly, I feel like it could have been written by Hezbollah AI chat GPT. It's not anything different than Nasrallah has said in the past. It's not anything different. I mean, yeah, okay, he threatened the carriers there. Like that's not completely uncredible, but again, he's posturing and he's defending himself. He constantly tried to say, hey, people have been saying we haven't done a lot. And as someone mentioned here, something about $30 billion in damage. Of course, it's not that bad. We've been doing so much, he was saying. His response is the idea that we're not doing enough. That's ridiculous. We're doing a lot, and we could do some more. And so, yeah, today you had some new missile, like one, right? And the thing is, everybody knows that they have hundreds of thousands of missiles, big, strong missiles with actual guidance that is not like what Hamas has. There's so much more power. Everybody knows this. Everybody looking at the performance art. I mean, Hezbollah, honestly, I'm not trying to denigrate the bravery or sacrifice that anybody's making on any side of this in terms of actually like trying to like fight people and not kill civilians. So Hezbollah is willing to sacrifice a few dozen, maybe 100 or a few hundred fighters before the end of this to make it look like, look at us, we really did something. We really stood up for the Palestinians. When everybody knows they could be firing thousands of missiles at once at Israel, do real damage, kill live people, and overwhelm them. And the fact that they're doing a mortar here, a mortar there, it's just this small ball, like D-level, coconut league stuff. It's not the real deal. It's not what Hezbollah is really capable of. But again, the point isn't to actually help Hamas. And they talked about diverting a third of the IDF. They don't need 2/3 or even a third of the IDF to do what they want to do in Gaza. It's not changing anything that's happening on the ground in Gaza. They want to win over public opinion within the
You the
Arab
same,
world.
Brian, from last
They
night.
want to
What
win
a
over.
change
I'm
of
sorry. I'm still
tune.
going. I'm still
What
going.
a
I'm
change
sorry.
of
I'm
tune,
sorry.
Brian, from
I'm
last
Okay,
still
so
going.
hold
night. I
on.
mean,
I'm
Yeah,
still
really?
no,
going. I'm
Brian.
still
Okay,
going.
just
Hala, hold on,
okay. So Brian,
go,
if
Brian.
you,
So
yeah, if you
all right.
could,
So
if you could finish up, Brian, because we got to go to
okay.
Zoom if it's over. Yep, great.
Sure. All right, but the important thing to realize here is that throughout this area, it's a big competition between the Saudis and Iran to win over public opinion. The Saudi Arabia has looked terrible. When I was in the Middle East, when I was in Jerusalem and in Jordan, I went to protests where people were condemning the Saudis. The Palestinians were furious at the Saudis for seeming the way they saw it. They were selling out the Palestinians. And that was the conditions of the general feelings before
Brian,
October 7th. Right?
Yeah. So Brian, I want to go to you, and I think the points that Brian was making, the initial points that he was making, I think everyone, I'm not sure if you were listening earlier, everyone's been making the same points about the speech. And I know you disagree. It'd be good to have you give the other side along with Hadi, because it just seems very weak, not showing any intention to escalate, distancing themselves from what happened. I'll give you examples. The first one is about the October 7th attack.
Mario,
Yes, Hala.
I read the speech. You don't need to give me the examples. I really read it. I listened to it in Arabic, and I read it in English, and I read it in Arabic, and I read it in English. And if you guys want to read it in Hebrew and French and whatever language, it's there. So I don't need the repeat of the speech. All I'm going to say are two things. And it's not about being on the other side or this side. The fact of the matter is there's a lot of amateurs around, okay? All of you guys here sitting and saying, Brian, are you the same person who was in the room yesterday and was going on and on and on and on and on nonstop? And then, and it's a totally
I didn't speak yesterday.
Hold on. Yeah,
I'm answering your question. That wasn't me. That's all I'm saying.
Room, in a different room, and your tune was different. But anyway, yeah, it's you, because I've seen your handle, so it's the same guy who sent me a message saying let's talk later.
I don't think it is very beside the point. Yes.
That's besides the point. So let's talk about this. In response to Brian, let's go with that. They've got all these stockpile of missiles and they're sitting on them. Okay, this is not how war works. Okay, this is not how a war works. It doesn't, because you have the stock of piles of missiles and rockets, and you throw them anytime that you, Brian, or you, Mario, or whoever is in this room very excited about waging a war does. They have their own war decisions to make. They are on the field, not you and me who sit here on Twitter and space and discuss it and analyze it and pretend we're all, commanders and what have you. They decide when and if, and just because they haven't, it doesn't mean that, they're weak. I mean, your interpretation of weak and their interpretation of weak and people's interpretation of weak are very different. We're not military. You're not military. Neither am I. But I think I know a little bit, tiny weeny bit about this group's performance over the years. So when you come here and pretend that, they have all these missiles and they haven't fired them, therefore, they're not intending to wage war. If you think war is such an easy thing that you just wage it because you guys want it and we're all excited and we just press the button and wage war, that's not how it works. So let's be very clear about that. As for Israel, if Israel wants to do a preempt, it could. I mean, that's a possibility. But when it does, let it be known, or let it be, make no mistake, that the response that it will get also will damage Tel Aviv to such a point. Yes, there will be American retaliation and everybody's going to back up and support Israel. But before it finishes, it will be destroyed as well. And that's the
Well, I
kind of
think that's
missiles.
going a little bit
Hold on,
too
Hala.
deep.
One
No,
second.
no, but
Hala,
hold on,
One second.
Hala.
hala.
That is the
Zev,
kind of
Zev.
missiles. That is the
Give
kind
her.
of missiles they have before. Let me finish.
Yeah, go ahead, Hala.
Zev, that's the kind. That's the kind of stockpiles they've had. They've been building up for the last few years. 2006 was bad, and maybe not as bad, but they've gone beyond that since. So there is a lot. All I'm trying to say is there's a lot of this attitude going around that because you guys want, expect it. Actually, this is it. The expectation. We all expected it to go to war, and it didn't. I mean, sorry, who are we to expect? And if they didn't, I mean, do they really give a shit about what we expected? This is not about us, guys.
So Hala,
This is
just
a
let
war
me.
that
I've
they're
got two
planning.
questions
Well,
for you.
I never said I
Brian,
expected
guys,
that.
Zev,
Okay,
just,
Brian,
just,
one
guys,
second.
everyone, just Hala, just easy. So I've got. So you made a lot of points, Hala, and I think you made valid points. The main one I disagree with is the Tel Aviv, that Tel Aviv will be destroyed. But beyond that, I don't think Hezbollah is weak, but obviously weak is a relative term. Are they weak relative to Hamas? No, they're extremely strong. Are they weak relative to the Israeli army, to the US army? I'd say extremely weak. But the question I have is, do you think the speech was them distancing themselves, especially when you go through the multiple references to the October 7th attack, and saying time and time again that had nothing to do with them. It was done in complete secrecy. None of the members of the Axis of Resistance knew about it. That's what made it a success. It was completely secret. Were you surprised by the number of statements they made about them not knowing regarding the October 7th attack?
No, because I know that this has been in the plan for a long, long time. And if I'm not saying it is the case, I just want to go with the hypothesis. If anyone would have known about this, it could have been only one person, maximum two, which is Nasrallah and somebody else, like the military commander. If they didn't know it was happening, no. Did they know it was happening at 7 o'clock on the 7th of October or whatever time it was, or 6 o'clock for that matter, at that precise moment? No. That was the whole point of this attack. It's a secrecy. I mean, the Israelis didn't even know about it.
No, I
And they didn't
understand.
feel.
I understand.
No.
But
Hold on.
the question.
You are Mario. You're asking me, and let me
Yeah. No,
answer.
it's just
You've been
it is.
insisting.
Yeah, go
You've been
ahead.
insisting that this is distancing themselves, and I've been trying to explain again that this is not distancing themselves. I mean, when you distance yourself, you don't get involved on the border with Lebanon and lose 60 men. Okay, you don't get engaged with.
No, so I'll tell you what I mean by my question. I'll tell you what I mean. No, Hala, the case it's back and forth. I want to ask you another question. So what I mean by distancing is, okay, they don't know. They could say it once, but for them to say it time and time again, I'm going to try to find the quotes for you. I know you know them, but just for the audience, for them to say it on so many occasions, just show they want to make it very clear. And to me, it shows, and to many, look, I've read a lot of people analyzing it as well, people that know Hezbollah pretty well, and they disagree. People analyzing it disagree. So there's different ways to interpret what he said. For him to saying it, concealing the October 7th operation has absolutely no effect on any of the resistance efforts. Absolute secrecy ensued the brilliant success of the operation. The owners of the operation hid it from the Palestinian factions and the resistance axis movements. That's all statements. Operation Al-Aqsa Flood was decided 100% Palestinian. Its implementation was 100% Palestinian, and its owners hid it from everyone. Absolute secrecy is what ensued the brilliant success of the October 7th operation through the factor of surprise. So you've got 5, 6. There's not one point they've made on so many occasions throughout the entire speech, other than this one. So that's what I mean by distancing themselves. I'm not saying they didn't get involved. They did get involved. They lost men. They're still today going back and forth. They've been going back and forth for a while. But they haven't gone beyond that, and I'm wondering whether they're intending to, or if there's even a red line, because no red line was even mentioned, at least not explicitly mentioned in the speech, unless you noticed one, Hala, that we didn't notice.
I mean, again, either you and I are not on the same English wavelength. Probably my English is much weaker than yours, or I'm not comprehending what you're saying. They repeated that they didn't know. It was a surprise. It was. Fine. I mean, why should they know? That's the first question. Why should they know? Hamas doesn't work for Hezbollah and vice versa. Each is an independent one, although there's an axis of resistance. This is the axis of resistance. They each have their own spaces. Hamas is trying to fight for Gaza and liberate itself and get its deals or its rights from the Israelis. Hezbollah will support that. if Hamas decides tomorrow, I mean, let's rewind a bit. Let's pretend, just for the sake of argument, October 7th didn't happen, and Hamas was going to launch an attack into Israel. Just one launch, a small launch, a big launch, a vehicle, a tank, a settlement. They don't have to report to Hezbollah and tell them that we're doing this. I mean, I don't understand.
No,
why
you're
everyone
convincing me.
feels
No, I'm not.
that
But Hala, I'm not
no,
convinced. I'm not. But Hala, you're answering the
okay.
question differently. You're telling me that, hey, Hezbollah shouldn't know. I'm not saying they should know. I'm saying, why do they need to tell us so many times that we don't know? Hey, we don't know. Just want to make it clear, we don't know. So please don't attack me as well.
It's a white flag.
They didn't say it just once. Like, we got it if they say it once, but they said it so many times that they wanted Israeli audience to know they were not involved.
This is a message not for you and for me. This is a message for Hamas as well. I mean, if they have, I'm going to go with another version. If they have a criticism for Hamas, for example, that they weren't told or they weren't informed about such a huge operation that was going to bring back such a huge retaliation, then they will leave that till later. These may be some little hints to Hamas. For example, I'm just going with all the different hypotheses that are on the table. Alternatively, they're just telling them that, okay, this was a big surprise, but you carried it off. Well done. Congratulations. And again, this was such a big surprise. Who expected it from you? This is all part of their encouragement as well. That, you pulled it off without telling anybody, without support from anyone. You pulled it off on your own. There are so many different ways of looking at this, guys. That's all I'm trying to say. But to just pick one and decide that this means that we go back to this distancing themselves. They distance themselves from the fact that they didn't know. So big deal, they didn't know. Okay, I mean, I'm not seeing what the big deal is here. Unless I'm missing something. Now,
No, I'd say
are they distancing themselves? Are they distancing themselves at the moment from what's going on? No, because again, it's a matter of interpretation as to how much you guys expect it to be involved and how much they think they should.
Hala, do you think it's fair point? Do you think how far do you think Hezbollah will go? I know Zev, you've got a question too, but how far do you think Hezbollah will go, and will they cross the current rules of engagement?
The current rules of engagement have been crossed little by little over the past 3 weeks. It started first within the 2 kilometers of the agreement within the Lebanese territory. Hezbollah preempted. Actually, this time it was them that started, not the other way around. So because Israel was busy with Gaza and really doesn't want another front, and I don't think Hezbollah wants. But however, if push comes to shove, then they will. And Israel retaliated within 2 kilometers. Then they went into a bit further, like they did 5 kilometers, and Israel retaliated within the 5 kilometers. But the one of the rules of engagement as well is civilians. You kill one of ours, we kill one of yours. You hit one of ours, we hit one of you. You hit an installation of ours, we hit it. These are part of the understanding between the two sides. Now, there were 2 farmers, not farmers, peasant.
Let's go civilians. Let's go civilians.
Shepherds.
Shepherds. Thank you. That were killed 2 nights ago. Okay, and
Hezbollah. Breaking news.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Is it Major Eyal?
Yes, I think it is major, and I'm also going to sleep because this discussion about the speech yesterday is totally boring.
Okay,
great.
What's the breaking news?
That's very interesting, but he's off the stage. Hala, go ahead.
Yeah, so there were 2 shepherds that were killed, and then the night before the speech, we saw them. We saw actually them firing. Like they started 2, 5, 7, 8, and then it was 15 clicks into Israel. I mean the northern border, not Israel. It is, but not. I don't mean like deep inside. So. This is going to be a long war. It's going to be, by the sounds of things anyway, it's going to be a protracted war. Now, people are also interpreting the fact that, Hezbollah didn't sort of launch this big, PlayStation, press the button, we're waging war, hey, hoo, ha, ha, ha. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make, had they done that the first thing that they would be saying when they do that is that Hamas is defeated. At the moment, as far as they know, and again, it's not me and you who know, because they are in communication with the commanders on the ground in Gaza. They know about the operations. He's getting a report. I'm just going to use general terminology, but I'm sure it's not the case. Let's say hour on hour or 5 hours on 5. They are getting updates from the ground on what Hamas is standing and what they have and what they're doing and where they're at. The feedback so far and this is not me talking from the top of my head, these are sources telling us this, that we know and we trust because they're part and parcel of this whole thing, that the feedback they're getting is that Hamas at the moment can stand on its own. Yes, the support that they're providing is enough for the time being, but they haven't
I'd like to ask you.
collapsed. My point is they haven't collapsed. Now,
Go ahead, Zev. Go. Salah, let Zev. Let's go. Go ahead, Zev.
Did she attack me? Could I clarify one thing?
No, just can you wait a minute, Brian? So
Robert.
We'll come back. No, I had a question for Hala, and so I am not a student of Nasrallah, right? But okay, so he kept repeating the same thing over and over again. And
Zeb, I'm not a student. I'm just a journalist and an observer.
No,
I
know.
He's not referring to you. I think he's referring to himself. Him not being a journalist.
I was referring to myself. I'm not a journalist or a student. I don't know HEZBOLLAH in a know. But I do know a little bit how speeches are written and how people like to grandstand and stuff. And just from my point of view, and I think a lot of Westerners' point of view, it looked like he was basically, some of his speech was, okay, he was speaking to his own audience. I don't even think he was speaking to Hamas. If he was speaking to Hamas, I think he did a really bad job and probably threw Hamas under the bus. But even to his own audience, I just, ceasefire, we didn't know. I view it differently than you. And just, I have to say one thing. So in terms of Tel Aviv being destroyed, before a missile would have hit Tel Aviv, in 2 minutes there'd be no more Lebanon. In 2 minutes there'd be no more Syria. In 2 minutes there'd be no more Iran.
You're both making outlandish statements. I don't think Tel Aviv will be destroyed, and I don't think Israel will have. There'll be no more Lebanon, no more Syria, no more whatever. None of this is gonna happen.
Just 1 second, Mario. I'm gonna push back on you for once. You are wrong. It goes back to what Alex said, and I can say that with absolute certainty. If there was ever a situation in which one of our major cities was going to be destroyed with intelligence, that would be an existential threat to the state of Israel, and that is not something.
Zev, do you think HEZBOLLAH will destroy Tel Aviv?
Well, obviously not.
Why we're
having clarifying it.
So yes, I don't think it's relevant.
No, it's relevant. Hold on, it's relevant. Hala, just 1 minute, please. Hala. Just 1 minute. I want to just offer my clarification to Mario. I said that just as a counterpoint to what Hala said. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, right? But I think they're both moot points. I don't think I don't think there's any. We're at
on
a stage
October the 6th, on October the 6th, everything.
Hala, I'll give you. I will give you the mic in a second. Hala, please do 6.
On October the 6th, all of this would have been a moot point. We never would have imagined that we'd be here discussing this.
I still think it is a moot point. I don't think we're at close to such a stage, but I could be wrong.
I agree with you.
Hala? Go ahead.
Yeah, like I said, maybe I should rephrase it when I say it will be destroyed. I mean, because usually what happens is if Israel is preempting an attack, it's going to come and hit some installations in Lebanon, whether it's the airport or the port or the southern suburbs or whatever, or the electricity powers or whatever. Part of this the understanding between them is it's person for person and installation for installation. If they hit Beirut airport before they respond, also Tel Aviv airport will be hit. That's my point.
If they hit the port, I think it's a good point. I think it's a good point that you made. Yeah, no, I agree. So
when I say sorry, I do stand corrected, Zeb. When I say they will destroy Tel Aviv, I don't mean it like they'll go and destroy Tel Aviv. I mean like each will be responded in kind until.
No, Hala, I agree with you, and I appreciate the clarification. And tempers are really high right now, so I think you can understand my response too. So what I wanted to do is,
can I please clarify one thing? Did she attack me?
Well, I don't know if she. Just 1 minute, Brian.
Brian, stop with this. Since last night, you get attacked.
Okay, Brian. Okay, Brian. So Hala, I wanted to ask you a question.
Speak as well, because Hala.
Okay, so I want to ask Hala a question, then we're going to go to Zumis and then to Gilad. My question is this in terms of HEZBOLLAH. Did you notice any change, as someone who's observed, and maybe Hadi could answer this, is there any change in the posturing of Nasrallah, or was it just, he's basically, same old Nasrallah, kind of a different line, different audience, but would you say that anything has changed with him or the general pulse of those in Lebanon?
I don't understand. Can you clarify it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I'm familiar with a few of other Nasrallah's speeches, right? I mean, Arabic's not my first language, but was there anything different about this speech compared to speeches that he's given over the last 20 years? And in terms of how people feel in Lebanon, what's the sentiment there in general? Go ahead.
Okay, one of the things, I think we were in another space yesterday discussing various things, and one of the things I commented on, and it was the fact that throughout this past week, before his statement on Friday, I think we were all hyped up and everybody hyped it up over and beyond. Okay, so come Friday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we were so hyped up. We were waiting for this guy or this dude or this Sayyid or this whoever to come and say, you know, I declare war. And then he didn't. And it was like a burst of the balloon and, you know, party pooper for a lot of people. All right. Now, even in Lebanon, even within his own community, by the way, you know, his fighters and whatever, they, you know, a lot of people wanted or believed that he would be declaring this kind of, you know, this language that we're using, you know, wage war, whatever that would be, wage war. He didn't. Now, the difference in his speech is this particular episode, if you want, between Gaza and Israel, and because of what happened on October 7 and the retaliation that's coming from the Israelis, and because of where everybody stands in the region at the moment, because of all this is a different level that we haven't seen before. So in his speech, even that is reflected. His speech may sound muted because we're talking on a bigger scale here, a scale that he hasn't been forced to deal with before. You know, when it used to be between Lebanon and Israel, it's Lebanon and Israel. When it's the Palestinians and Israel on a smaller scale, it's Palestinian and Israel on a smaller scale.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah, at the moment, we are looking perhaps, I'm not saying, because I really doubt it, but I'm just going with the flow of, you know, the arguments put here, there, and everywhere, that, you know, this could trigger a regional war, for example. And I want to go, let's say, for the sake of argument. So when you are going on a speech and you are someone who he considers and he is seen to be a responsible leader of his
I have a quick question.
People.
I have a quick question.
Hold on. Before
you quickly go ahead.
Let me just finish.
Go ahead.
Mario, let me just finish it. So when he's responding to something like this on such a scale, he has to be very careful and, yes, not overexcited, and very wise and very calm and very responsible in how he's wording each sentence he's saying, each word. He's a man known to think about every word and what it means and what message it sends. So yeah, if you're saying this is different, absolutely it is different, because the situation is different and and the possibilities are different. So he has to rise to this occasion, and it's different than the others. That's all.
I appreciate it. I have a question for you. What do you think, in your opinion? Then I want to go to the hands. In your opinion, what would be a red line for Hezbollah to go all out? And I know it's a pretty vague question, but to start, you know, to see a barrage of rockets going through from Lebanon towards Israel, which was what everyone was scared of in the first few days of the war.
Sorry, Mario, I missed that. Can you say that again?
Sure. So what do you think it would take? What is a red line, in your opinion, if there is one, for Hezbollah to get completely involved in this war, to just say declare war on Israel?
Again, I don't think it's a case of declaring war. I mean, I think Hadi yesterday put it in Hadi, help me out, because I never remember, you know, my memory these days. You know, Hollywood style of declaring war. It is
ignore Hollywood style. What do you? Okay, I'll understand. Let me change my question.
No,
let me change. This trick doesn't work on me, Hala. They're saying the same word many times until I stop talking. No, I'll rephrase my question so you can still answer the same question, Hala. But let me rephrase it so it's more accurate. Is there a red line where Hezbollah will send thousands of rockets towards Israel all at once, sudden barrage of rockets?
I don't know how, really, I don't know how the military will work, whether it's 100 rockets at a time or whether they will expand gradually and slowly, deeper into slowly, like they've done, you know, 2, 5, 8, 15, and so on and so forth. I think at the moment, this war that was supposed to be happening between south and the northern part of Israel, meaning the border between Lebanon and Israel, and the idea that they might, you know, initially their plans or their ideas or their military calculations would have been, you know, to go into these settlements or whatever and take them over. For example, I don't think this is now part of the equation, because things have changed in there. So everybody's like rearranging. So no, I don't know how they will do it. And I don't know if it would be like, you know, they never would send 100 barrage again, they're picky. They know what they have in the stocks, and they don't waste. They try not to waste, and they will use it how they see fit. Numbers, I really can't answer that. I'm not.
No, I appreciate it. I think you've given a good answer. So I want to go to Zoom.
Yeah, please clarify one thing, just one thing for Hala.
Go ahead, Brian.
Me repeatedly. I'll be very quick. Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it. Listen, Hala, I understand a lot where you're actually coming from, and what I was trying to get to before you kind of jumped in was that while I'm mocking the speech, Hezbollah is very powerful. Israel knows this, and they're far more powerful than Hamas, and they're so powerful that they don't want to risk their power getting too involved in this. So what I was saying was that they were doing these kind of demonstratory things to kind of win public opinion, but they are in a good spot in terms of being very powerful as part of the government of Lebanon. And the way that they're pulling back from confrontation, a bit like Hamas did once it took over Gaza, except they're in such a better position than Hamas was back then. They have a lot to lose because they've worked very hard to build up and gain so much. So I'm saying that even though the speech was a kind of a dud as far as a lot of audiences in the region that were hoping for Hamas to do more because they know Hamas is powerful, I'm admitting, I'm not saying.
I understand. So Hala, I don't guys. I do want to go. I appreciate the clarification, Brian. Hala, I know you want to respond, but let me go to Xumis as well. Let's just get another voice in here as well. Xumis, Hala's made a lot of points, made them very eloquently. I would love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you.
Hala, please, Hala. What's the urgent news, Hala? Let's see. Hold on. What's the urgent news, Hala? You got to unmute bottom left corner. I think you're playing me, but I could be wrong.
No, I'm not playing you. Just bear with me. I'm just going to read it to you.
Go ahead.
Hold on. Let me open the thing.
Thank you.
Breaking. Hezbollah says it struck a gathering of IDF troops along the border region.
I've got that. Yeah. I do have that. Yeah, I read it. I read it while. Right. But is that mate? Because I was gonna read it in the space, and I thought this is back tit for tat. So Hezbollah says
no. This is not waging war. I'm just reading.
No, I know. Yeah.
I mean, for those saying that they're not engaging and they're not engaged, I'm just saying that's all.
No, there is engagement all day today. They fired the heading, the title of my space was them firing that volcano missile that everyone's been talking about, which everyone considered an escalation. So no, there is that's why I was concerned about the speech yesterday. Is that the developments over the last few days have been pretty concerning, especially the 48 hours before the speech have been extremely concerning. But yeah, they're definitely engaged. And for anyone saying that Hezbollah is not involved, I think it's too far. And for anyone saying that Hezbollah is backing Hamas and they will not let Hamas fall, I think it's another extreme. I think it's somewhere in the middle. They are involved, but they're not as involved as some would have liked to see, including Hamas. But let's go to Zumis. Zumis, I'd love your thoughts on what Hala said so far.
Yeah, thank you. Replying to what Hala said a lot of things, and there's been a lot of things said in the panel, but let's address some things first. Hala mentioned that there's an hour-by-hour coordination or update from Gaza to Hezbollah. This is false. Hamas themselves have been out and said, Musa Abu al-Marzouk has been out in an interview, and he said there's no coordination whatsoever between Hamas and any other axis of resistant group.
But they met, they had a meeting in Lebanon, and there was a picture out with Hezbollah and Hamas meeting, sitting there together. And the Hamas leader met Iran today as well. Met the Iranian leader.
There's a different, this is the difference. Hamas has a political division and a military wing. The ones who are taking out the military wing is Al-Qassam. You see, so when we're talking about military movements on the ground, you need an update from Al-Qassam, not from the Hamas political office or the political bureau.
Yes, and we know that. And yes, they are. And I'm sorry.
Hala, do not interrupt.
So go ahead, and then we'll go to Hala.
Second of all, something very important here was mentioned about the energy of Nasrallah in his speech. Nasrallah has made it very clear. He's held speeches before. He talked about the situation in Syria. When he talked about Syria, he said, if we have 100 soldiers in Syria, we'll make it 200. If we have 1,000, we'll make it 2,000. If we have 5,000, we'll make it 10,000. Yesterday, he was saying, why isn't the UN involved in Palestine? Why are they doing anything about Palestine? Our goal is to secure a ceasefire. That is what he said. That's how everyone, the majority in the Arab world, understood the speech. There's some people who are trying to make it out to be as if Hezbollah is going to save the day. Hezbollah's only red line, when we're talking about red lines, is Iran. If Iran is attacked, you'll see Hezbollah get involved.
Mario, I can respond.
Yeah, then we'll go to Hala. Go ahead. Zumis, we'll go back. Zumis. Hold on, Zumis. Hold on, 2 seconds, Hadi. Yeah, Zumis, I actually want to... Zumis, 2 seconds. I want to go back to you, Zumis. I'm actually enjoying this back and forth. Go ahead, Hadi.
Okay, regarding the speech in Syria, unfortunately... I don't know a lot of the speakers here, but they're talking the same rhetoric that we've been hearing from people like Faisal Qasim and Al Jazeera and those clownish. I'm talking not Zumas was the clownish. I'm talking about the clownish ones and Al Jazeera and those that very childish. And there's no proof of that. When Nasrallah said about Syria will send 5,000, don't forget that was after Hezbollah got involved and there was escalations and there was attacks in Beirut and suicide bombings in Beirut. So of course he's going to escalate his tone. When the war in Syria first started, his tone was similar to what you're hearing right now. We're trying to comfort everything. We're trying.
Hadi, that's not the point. Hadi, that's not the point.
Let me finish. I'll let you respond right after me. Don't worry. when the war in Syria started, his tone was very calm. He was saying, "Let's sit together." He's telling the opposition, "Let's all sit together," telling you have rightful demands. If you were having the space back then, you would say he's backing out. When the opposition and Al Qaeda, ISIS gathered and they started going on the borders with Lebanon, Hezbollah attacked, and then we had retaliations. They bombed Beirut, and that's when his tone went up, and he started saying, "If we have 5,000 fighters in Syria, it will be 10,000," because he was already engaged in the war. Like I said, if we were having the spaces back then, you will all be saying, "Oh, he was backing out. He's telling let's sit with the opposition. He doesn't want war." But eventually, he was dragged into the war, and they won, and they did win the war, and it was horrible. And we kept hearing the same talk: Assad's days are numbered. Hezbollah is getting burned. They're still here. I'm sorry, but that's what I wanted to say. So let's not go into those details, like Faisal Al Qasim, who blocked me, by the way, and we're talking about here about what's happening on the ground right now. You can answer, Zumas. I'm gonna let him respond.
What we're talking about is the determinants of Nasrallah, how he holds his speeches, how he talks when he's serious, how he talks when he isn't serious. So that is the difference. Second of all, we're talking about Hezbollah. We keep talking about it, and we keep talking about a quote-unquote axis of resistance, as if Hamas is part of this axis of resistance. Was Hamas part of the axis of resistance when Hezbollah and Hamas were on opposite sides in the Syrian civil war? There is no axis of resistance between Hamas and Hezbollah to begin with for us to talk about it.
That
Third
shows
of
how
all,
little you know,
wait,
sir.
Go ahead, Hala.
Third
Let's
of all,
go.
Hala,
Yeah, go ahead. Make one more point. Zumis, and we'll go to Hala.
yeah, but Hala had a lot of time to speak.
No,
He's
I
not
know.
interrupting.
Go ahead, Zumas. Let him speak. Let him
Yeah,
speak.
yeah. Third of all, when we're talking about the quote-unquote Iraqi resistance, which both Hadi and Hala have been mentioning, the Iraqi quote-unquote resistance has been from the inception, as we mentioned, from the Iraqi Liberation Act, funded by the US. Under the US invasion, they patrolled the streets of Basra on behalf of the British. Until 2020, the battle forces were funded by the US. We're talking about a force that uses Abrams tanks, M15s, and F-16 fighter jets. They're supposed to attack US interests? That's not possible. That's not going to happen. It is a complete lie, and it's a joke for anyone to say that there is a such thing as an Iraqi resistance that will face that poses any threat whatsoever to Israel or the US. This doesn't exist. So let's keep it realistic. Let's talk about the
Thank you,
facts.
Zumas. Actually,
Thank
I'm
you.
actually glad you mentioned that point
Hadi,
because
attacking the Dead Sea on an empty whatnot, it doesn't
Zumas,
matter. Where is the
just
visual
second,
proof?
just second.
What has been caused as a loss
So this
to
is so Zumis. What Zumis is mentioning.
Understand your point.
Let me just give the audience context. So you're referring to the Islamic resistance in Iraq, correct, Zumis?
I'm talking about the
Hashd al-Sha'bi.
PMF and very specifically the Badr organization. If anyone wants to look into the history of Badr,
No. So I'm talking before getting to Badr, the rocket that went to the Dead Sea. And they made the announcement the day before Hezbollah speech. So yes, just for the audience, we talked about it. Then it actually happened during our space. So the Islamic resistance in Iraq, I think it was, they shot a rocket allegedly towards Israel, landed in the Dead Sea, and they said there's going to be more to come, and they're going to escalate next week. Which was the first. It was symbolically, it was very.
I don't think it landed. I don't think it landed in the Dead
on the
Sea.
border of the Dead Sea.
I think it was shut down before.
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, exactly. But go ahead, Hadi.
Yeah, and I just want to. I'm actually glad he mentioned that point because remember all the time when our Syrian speakers, and I actually friends with one of them right now. Thank you for the space. So when they were speaking, saying that when I asked the question, do you actually believe Hezbollah and Israel are on the same side on the table? They said no because there is this rhetoric. So Zumas, are you saying the PMU, the Hashd al-Sha'bi, is actually being funded by
Hadi, you're asking a rhetorical question that's not relevant. What I'm saying to you is that the Badr organization was created by Iran, funded by the US, participating in the US invasion of Iraq, and was funded by the US until 2020. That is a fact. How you want to flip it around doesn't matter, Hadi. That is the fact. That is the fact. Do you want the source for that? I can give you the source. That is it. No, Hadi, we're not going to play this game.
Okay, so what game, Hadi? Can you explain to me what game is you referring to? Be objectively. So I know what you guys are arguing.
Basically, what we're talking about. Let me explain. Okay, so must chill, bro. Just a second.
Go ahead.
What we're talking about is because there is this rhetoric. Because I think Zumas is from Iraq as well. There's rhetoric from the Iraqi opposite side of the Islamic resistance, where they say that the PMU, which is Hashd al-Sha'bi, or the Islamic resistance, there's different fractions.
Which is Iranian back, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That they were funded by the US. They were installed there by the US after Saddam Hussein was overthrown, and they were basically a tool for the US invasion of Iraq. So they have this rhetoric. So what we're discussing right now, me and Zumas, if until today they are still under the orders and like funding of America, because he's saying there
Okay,
would
hold on,
never.
Zumas.
I'm
I want to
just
go.
explaining
So,
both points, and then you can defend your point.
yeah. So
So I'm saying
yeah. Go ahead.
that they're not funded by the US, backed by the US, and they will target
Let me
US interests. He's saying there's no way they will target
answer. So
US
let
interests.
me read out a statement here that I got from someone that's give me a bit of a summary. Not a summary, but a take from behind the scenes. So my sources have mentioned that one of the main reasons that Hezbollah and Iran have distanced themselves is because they want to keep this a Palestinian issue. If Iran and Hezbollah were to come out and say they were behind this, and we all know about it, then the narrative would change among Arab world and all over the world, to be frank. It would become an Iran versus Israel issue, which is precisely what Iran and Hezbollah don't want. Keeping it a Palestinian conflict allows the public support to be there. No one in the space has mentioned that, which is why I wanted to send you this. Hopefully someone sees this message. So I want to go to Hoshiyar, and I'm seeing a lot of people clap and stuff. Dev, maybe before
Yeah,
and
Hoshiyar
then
actually might have good points on that.
Yeah, a couple of corrections on the Badr organization. The Badr organization is currently headed by Hadi Al-Amri. I mentioned him a couple of days ago. That is actually the military wing of the Supreme Council of for the Islamic Revolution in Iraq. That was basically the majority of Shia parties. They have been in government. They control the government. Now the PMF force I mentioned have about 5-6 billions of budget from the Iraqi government, so they don't need money from the Americans. Just to correct that, and they are not the ones now firing at American bases. But I think, Mario, the way to look at the speech from the angle whether it was strong or weak is not the correct, I think, approach. First of all, you have to realize it's a fact that most of the Israeli cabinet have been in war. They are generals and whatnot. That's true also for the Iranians. Everyone you see in Iran, including the supreme leader, has had command of armies during at least the Iran-Iraq war. Nasrullah is very, very experienced. Sometimes, for example, if you don't have to be a military, commander to know some things. If you are a student of history, for example, history of wars, I mentioned Sun Tzu. Sometimes if you back away from a war, if you even run away, it's not cowardice. It's just sensible. Give you a couple of examples. For example, in the American Revolution, Washington fought like 9 battles. He lost 6, but he was always running away to try to preserve his army. And many people at the time were against it, but that was his priority. In the American Civil War, in the Battle of Gettysburg, General Lee made a lot of mistakes, fighting when he shouldn't have fought.
I want to
Anyways,
ask you. Can I ask you? Sorry, Hoshiyar, I want to ask you a question. I've just pinned it above. The team sent it to me, and I appreciate one of our speakers, Habiba, told me, Mario, where this is who the panel's referring to. So my team's actually posted it while we're talking 21 minutes ago. There was a statement by the Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, and they said essentially Blinken not welcomed in Iraq. Blinken is not welcomed in Iraq, and if he visits Baghdad, we will face him with unprecedented escalation. We will work on closing all U.S. assets in Iraq and the region in the upcoming weeks. Your thoughts on this statement? I've pinned it above for anyone else to see, including you, Hoshiyar.
Well, Kataib al-Hezbollah, by the way, are the ones that targeted American bases, and in retaliation, Soleimani was targeted in Iraq with Abu Mahdi Muhandis back in 2020. Anyways, they are part of the government. They are led by Qais Khazali. I mentioned him. He was in American prison, actually. They are in parliament. They have ministers. He's part of the coordination framework. Because he's part of the government.
What are they capable? Without getting too deep into Iraqi or Lebanese politics, what are their capabilities?
I would say compared to like 55 groups within the PMF forces, they fall kind of in the middle or even below that. And they don't have that many, fighters. They don't have that many resources and access to equipment. But it is predicted because now sort of this has become a competition between these different factions, who's going to show himself to be more courageous than the other. But just very briefly on the speech, as I said initially, I think some of the speakers were not here back then. If you think there is a trap by Israel to get you involved and then attack and if not destroy you, degrade you, to a large extent, it's very wise to say, well, we don't want to get involved. Even if you want to get involved, it's better to play on the opinion of the other leaders that you are weak, you don't want to fight. And I think the Americans, you mentioned the aircraft carriers, that was not a goodwill gesture, as Ben mentioned. I think they had intelligence. This will escalate. That's why they send those forces. And I think the Israelis have not bought yesterday's speech as a weak. That's why Gallant today repeated the same warnings for Hezbollah. I think it's as I said, it's the angle weak or strong is not especially if it's a long war. It's going to take a lot to make that decision. But I don't expect anything major happening if Secretary Blinken does visit Iraq.
I'd like to ask Hoshar a quick question. So, why is everyone trying to contextualize everything, right? I mean, well, maybe he wanted to keep the focus on the Palestinian cause. Wouldn't he not have said that? I mean, trying to read between the lines and not taking a person at his word when it's repeated things 5 times. Just hold on. It reminds me of when Donald Trump got COVID and his mega crowd said, well, no, he purposely went to get COVID to see what it was like to show how tough he is. That's ridiculous. He got COVID because he didn't wear a mask. But that's how people try to interpret it. So what I'm saying is the fact that he kept saying over and over again, well, we just want a ceasefire. We had nothing to do with it. Why would he not have said, I don't want this to become a wider issue. This is a Palestinian issue. You know what I mean? Why is everybody trying to read between the lines when we can't just take him at his word when he repeats things 5-6 times in a row?
Okay, just one thing. The ceasefire actually that he kept on going on about was for humanitarian reasons because of the blood that's being spilled, the kids, the babies, the fetuses, the women, the men, the children.
Why wouldn't you call for an end to the war then?
A ceasefire in effect is a beginning of an.
A ceasefire. I'll tell you what I asked. I'll let you know what I'm asking. If you wanted to, if he said the war has to end, everyone would be like, "Hala." If he says the war has to end, that means he drew a line that the war has to end, and then he's obliged to make sure he gets involved unless the war ends. But if he says we need a ceasefire, it's a much easier target, and much easier target to reach, which it seems that it's progressing based on the comments we've seen now, 24 hours since the speech.
Mario, the situation between Israel and Gaza and this actual war, when you have goals for example, when the Israel is saying, we need to and we want to defeat, and not just defeat, we need to wipe Hamas out of its existence. We need to do this, whatever it takes. Okay, so we're talking here something much bigger than the usual tit for tat here, there, and the other.
Sure.
So calling for let's end the war doesn't work that way, because there's a lot that the Israelis still want to fulfill and a lot that the Palestinians want in return to fulfill as well. So ceasefire in situations like this is the beginning of the talks to end the war. You start there.
No, that's not what it is at all.
Okay.
It is.
Hold on. Yeah, just 1 minute. So, look, a week ago when we were all speaking here before the speech of Nasrallah, a lot of people were saying, no, look, the red line is going to be if Israel goes and does a siege on Gaza. That's when they're going to get involved. Well, the siege on Gaza is ongoing. Gaza City is encircled, right? So clearly that red line, people, they misjudge that red line.
Actually, I didn't say that.
Not you.
We're not referring to you.
No one said that. But no one said that. I'm
a lot of people said. A lot of people said. A lot of people said that.
I don't care what the people say. It's what they say. But I was one of those people who were saying, and I don't think anyone can, because I kept repeating it. If there's gonna be a red line, he's gonna come in if they see Hamas cannot hold. That's exactly the words I kept.
Hamas doesn't look like it's holding much.
They are holding. I mean, whether you like, they're still holding.
No, listen.
You can look at another way, but they're still holding.
They've encircled within a week. They've encircled northern Gaza within a week.
But it's fine. I mean, it's Israel, Mario. They have the capabilities in the Middle East.
Yeah, but how's?
Yeah,
no. Hold on, Mario. I have to interject you. So, right. So, no, Hamas is not holding.
I have a question for you. Okay,
sure.
You're saying that Hamas is not holding. Why did Israel say this war might take months, maybe a year? Because they know they can't defeat it that fast.
No, I'll answer that too.
Very
right. So, Israel could defeat Hamas very, very quickly if the hands of the Israeli administration, the government, were tied by others, the U.S., Britain, and France, and so forth. So, of course, they've already started to defeat Hamas. Look at Gaza City. It is circled. Hamas hasn't done anything. If they had done anything, Gaza City wouldn't be circled, right? So it's going to take a long time because they're going to go from north to south. They're going to clear up Gaza City, and then they're going to go from the south. They're going to keep going down and down. I think it was Malcolm Nance who made the point, right? It's going to be like a Pac-Man slowly eating away at it, and I think that's the strategy. Now, it's also been reported that within the next week, the airstrikes are going to subside, and you're going to see the clearing of tunnels. So if Hamas is going to survive, then we shall see. I don't think that they've made any progress whatsoever. I think the fact that they're calling for, well, we can release this, we can do this if you a ceasefire and humanitarian and blah blah blah. I think that shows weakness on their part. They know that they're circled. Gaza City is literally circled with Israeli soldiers, right? That's number one. Number two is, in terms of, I never said that you made the claim about Hezbollah and the red lines, but other people absolutely did. So all I'm saying is, if they think that they're going to defeat or whatever, you have to show me that on a tactical map of Gaza
2 seconds.
itself.
Guys,
Right?
2 seconds.
Go ahead.
Just move away from the debate for a bit. I don't know if the team posted it already, but let me read out from the State Department. The State Department recommends that U.S. citizens in Lebanon leave now while commercial flights remain available due to unpredictable security
That
situation.
was expected.
Available flight options
Yeah,
to Beirut Rafik at the airport have a plan in action for crisis situations that does not rely on U.S. government assistance. The best time to leave a country is before a crisis, if at all possible. U.S. military-assisted evacuations of civilians from a foreign country are rare. There is no guarantees the U.S. government will evacuate private U.S. citizens and their family members in a crisis situation. Embassy Beirut Consular section is open for emergency U.S. citizen services, including passport services on a walk-in. So this is a third such alert with much more much more urgent
That
language.
proves
and
my
also I
point,
can tell you
Mario,
why.
that
Yes,
the
sorry, that's 2
U.S.
seconds.
Israel are not buying Nasrallah, backing out. They've
No,
not bought that.
I don't think that's what that necessarily means. I view it opposite. I think that they are concerned that Israel probably will or may launch a preemptive strike. I mean, look, the Israelis are itching
Let's
for
go.
that. Let's just
Let's
be very
before
crystal
going
clear.
back there. I want to
Yeah.
focus on that alert. I want to
They're
focus on that alert. Heidi will go to you in a bit. Heidi, you've analyzed alerts for us. Is anyone can give us more context on that alert and what it could mean?
Okay, I can give you context.
yes.
We'll go
There's
to
two ways to it,
Heidi and then
we go to
Hala.
Hala.
Yes.
Yeah, there's two ways you can look at it. The first thing is, either they believe there's going to be an escalation. I don't want to debate whether it's a preemptive strike from Israel or Hezbollah, but it still means that Hezbollah did not back down. That's one. It could be a preemptive strike, but because Hezbollah won't be silent about it, that means there's going to be an escalation. Let's go with that. The second thing is, and also it could be together, that they fear the U.S. embassy in Lebanon might be a target, so they cannot later contact their citizens or help them in any way. So they're probably telling them, go ahead now, because if there's a threat to us, we're going to leave, and we don't have time to collect you all with us and take you. So go leave now, because more security measures are going to be focused on the important people in the embassy. So these are the two ways you can think of it.
And one more thing, if I may. In his speech yesterday, there was a reference to the children and the grandchildren of 1982. Now, 1982 was the attack on the U.S. Marines. 240 U.S. Marines were killed in Lebanon. It was under the banner of Islamic Jihad, because officially Hezbollah, as we know now, did not exist. But all these groups there was a mood. This was the inception, if you want, the beginning of the inception of the idea of the birth of this group that would develop into Hezbollah later. So all these references of 1982, the message is basically that you were hit in 1982. And in 1982, we were talking about, hold on,
yeah,
please, let me
I want to focus on the alert. Go ahead. But I just want to understand that alert.
That's the
Okay.
I'm coming to the
Perfect.
alert.
Thank you.
So I'm bringing that reference to tell you about the alert. So when they're referencing that in the speech yesterday, they're basically saying that, I mean, what they're insinuating is that U.S. interests, whichever it may be, whether it's citizens, maybe whether it's the embassy, whatever, could be in danger.
Yeah.
So it is a must for any embassy when it hears that to evacuate and to call for its citizens to leave. I mean, over the last few years, for much less things. We had Gulf country every few months telling their people to evacuate Lebanon and then back to Lebanon, then evacuate back. This is becoming like the norm. But on this scale with the Americans, they're also trying to preempt any danger in the future for their own, whether they're schools or citizens or teachers, people that there are lots of Americans that are actually living in Beirut at the moment. Remember, they had the hostage crisis as well. I'm not saying these are things that would happen. I'm just reminding you of the history that Lebanon
if these things happen, Hala, these are the things that could lead to a war in Lebanon, no? If it goes that far, if there's an attack on the US embassy.
I'm not saying these things will happen. I'm just saying that these are all possibilities if there is a war launched. There was a reference yesterday in a speech of a reminder of 1982. That's all. You guys
And
interpret
Mario,
it how you want.
Also, we can ask. He's a Lebanese journalist, Ibrahim. He can give more context on that as well.
Ibrahim, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
Good, man, good. Your thoughts on this? Obviously, you've got thoughts on many things, but on that particular alert?
Yeah, I've heard the discuss what you're talking about, but I have a little follow-up, and Hala just mentioned that. Nasrallah just mentioned and remind them of the thing that happened in 1982. And he said that persons who did this, they are still alive and they have their sons and grandsons, and they are ready to fight again if you try to do the same thing that you've done in the 1982. So that was a clear message that he's ready for that, and he already just mentioned that he's ready for the warships in the Mediterranean Sea, and he prepared some things for them. My conclusion about this and what I see from this is it's like the warships are there just for the support of Israel, because it might have some issues when she's having some fights with Hamas, and then the Hezbollah starts a wider range of fire. So it's going to be like a support for them. He just mentioned that.
Does anyone remember the quote? Sorry, does anyone remember the quote when he refers to the 1980s? I want to read the exact quote. Can you give me like a keyword and I'll find the quote?
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you in English.
I have it in my tweet. Yeah.
Yeah, if you could send it to me, both Hala and Hadi, that would be great, please.
Yeah, Hala will send it. It's fine. She has it.
Perfect, Hala. If you could send it to me via DM on Twitter, I think she just dropped out.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Ibrahim. I don't think we stopped hearing you. I do want, so Heidi, if you have Hada's contact, if you can have a message to me. Habiba's there. I can see her listening. Habiba, if you can send it to me as well, or anyone that has it, that would be great. I do want to see that quote. Because I want to see if that relates to the travel alert that was given. Because it's just interesting that was given literally a day after the speech. The timing of it is what makes it very potentially concerning for me. I do want to go to Araboid. Araboid, you've been pretty quiet throughout this. Your thoughts on what's been going back and forth right now, and especially the travel alert.
I'm gonna comment on the travel alert later. But the convo was kind of shifted since I had my hand raised. What I wanted to add is what nobody mentioned so far in this space, which is surprising, is Khalid Mish'al, top Hamas official, saying that all we're seeing from the axis of resistance is shy condemnations and statements. This is a time of war. This is a time to unite the fronts. This is a time to engage the Zionist entity at its weakest point. And we've seen nothing from them but condemnations and statements. And in his speech, Nasrallah basically became a human rights activist. It's not as if he's running the most powerful paramilitary in the Middle East. He's talking about casualties, and he's redrawn his red line multiple times to the point where they and the US are on the same page now.
What do you think?
The US says if anyone else...
Before I want you to continue.
Just let me finish, please.
I'm gonna go back to you. I want you to continue because you're moving to a separate point. Can you first send me the quote you just mentioned via DM? In the meantime, I want to have your thoughts on a particular quote from the Hamas leader.
Just wait, hold on a second. Just give me a second. Give me a second, so I don't lose my train of thought.
Okay,
I'll send you the quote from Khalid Mish'al later. But give me a second.
I'll go back. Guys.
So what?
Guys.
I
don't know if you can hear me.
The thing you are talking about, Mario, you shared it already days ago.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, you talked about.
it.
Yeah, I know. But I want to. It's interesting to bring it up now. But what's the counterpoint to that? Because if you link that to Hezbollah's statement, that
Yeah, the counterpoint is I actually posted a reply under it. I told you I'm gonna context to it. That the reply is Khalid Mishhal and Ismail Haniyeh. Both of them are in the political part of it, and I think even Zuma said it. I don't think he's gonna contradict himself now when he said they're different than the military part, because he said it and it was obvious. When they said that they want to see more, it's not up to them what they say, because they also had a lot of things to say about Syria, and when ties with Syria were rebuilt last year, the Hamas people went to Damascus and they excluded Khalid Mishal and Ismail Haniyeh for what they said. And even those two didn't even know about the operation was happening in Gaza, the military one.
So
I
what's
wouldn't
the?
think.
How do you spell? Let me see how you spell Khalid Mishal. I want to find my tweet about it so I could.
And actually, I think Ziad, because he's from Palestine, he can talk more
And
about the
my
difference between
counterpoint
them.
to that is a political office of Hamas in Lebanon is different to basically the leadership of the Islamic
Khalid Mishal and
regions
Ismail Haniyeh
in
are not the
Palestine.
leadership. They're
They
basically
are the political leaders of Hamas,
they're
and
not the
they're outside the
political leaders
country.
of
Anyways,
Hamas.
to continue my point.
Yeah, it says. Hold on. It says Khalid Mashal is a Palestinian political leader who is former head of the militant organization Hamas.
Yes, he is a political leader, but he's not the head. He was
So
there.
who's
He's
the
based
head?
in
one
Qatar.
one of one
No,
of
it
one of
doesn't.
the
And
high
remember, I
leadership
think
of
Mario
Hamas is
was
what
He
I
is the
said, to be
head of
accurate.
Hamas for abroad, for foreign affairs.
Yeah, we can let Ziad speak on this because he's Palestinian. He's the only one here who can talk about that one.
If you allow me, Mario.
But to continue my point before
Yeah, go
anyone
ahead. Go
else
ahead.
takes
Andrew.
over.
Avoid.
So the U.S. and Hezbollah have an understanding now. If basically the U.S.'s red line is if anyone else gets involved in this conflict militarily, and by that they mean an incursion into Israel, they're gonna bomb Lebanon. And Nasrallah's red line is if the U.S. gets involved militarily on Israel's side, then we're gonna get involved and go into Israel. So they have this peaceful understanding that they're not gonna intervene really, the way that Hamas and Al-Qassam expect them to. They've called them out for it, and that's where we are right now.
Okay, Ziad, go
Sorry.
ahead. Ibrahim, just a second. Because we don't want to lose this point, so we'll
Yeah,
go to
go ahead.
Ziad and then to you, Ibrahim.
All right, so I'll speak quickly, but I have to relate your question about Mashhad to the speech itself. If you want to read through the speech, you need to get the political side of it with the military tactics side of it. When he was speaking all the time about about the point that you were all talking about, which is that we didn't know about that, we had no other idea about that. He was referring his speech to the Arab world in order to convince them and make them understand that this was because of the Palestinian cause for four main files, including the prisoners, Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa Mosque settlements, and the number of Palestinians killed in the last year in the West Bank. And he finished his sentence about this point by saying, "Well, I'm making it clear that they didn't do it for the sake of Iran." This is one thing. The other thing, when he spoke about the secrecy that he didn't know, because I mean, everyone knows, like, for each movement there is a political wing and there is a military wing. And if I personally assume if the political wing of Hamas itself, not Hezbollah, knew about what was going to happen on the 7th of October, there would have been much of talk about that in the intelligence services in Israel and the US and other places. And that's why Mohammed Deif and his military leadership decided to completely make a shutdown and not even to notify the Hamas political leadership, rather than speaking about Hezbollah and the other leaderships. As for the red lines that he was speaking about, I think Nasrallah yesterday was speaking on a higher level and putting the red lines on something that is much more than Hamas with Israel. Number one, he talked about, and prior to that, he was preparing his own audience and the Palestinian audience, that the price that we're paying today by seeing all of these thousands of civilians getting killed is a worth price when speaking about the thousands of Palestinian prisoners who were completely neglected by the international community for the last 10 years. When speaking about the attempts to divide the Aqsa Mosque and the building of settlements and the Palestinians killed in the West Bank without anyone talking about it. And he was also preparing his internal front about the fact that if he goes for escalation and there will be casualties on the Lebanese side, this is a price that is worth paying when speaking about Tufan al-Aqsa, which is, or what he calls it, the title of the road to Jerusalem. As for his red lines, by completely separating what we see now from civilian casualties, he said three main points. If I see Hamas not coming out as a winning side out of this battle,
we would interfere. If I see the ground operation becoming wider, and by saying that, he was referring directly to the tactics on the ground in which the IOF is trying to do currently, which is to go through the Zaytun Street and get into the middle of Gaza, because according to their saying, not mine, is that they believe the military leadership of Hamas exists in the center and close to the Shifa hospital between two and 100 underlines behind it. And the third point which he mentioned, which is extremely important because it can't be controlled neither by Israel nor Hamas, is if there would be a lot of casualties on the Lebanese side by mistake because of the round of missiles that are taking place between Lebanon and Israel now. So, for example, if there is an Israeli missile that would target the Lebanese side and kills 100 Lebanese civilians, this would be justification for him to go on a wider scale. And last point, Mario, which is important for me, he ended his speech not by de-escalating, but literally by escalating when speaking about the U.S. warships and holding it responsible, and the only one that could stop what's going on, in which he described it as if they are the chief command of Israel when speaking about what is going on in Gaza, and mentioning also that, you know, you bring your U.S. warships and you threaten us with them, in addition to the point that Hala mentioned about the 80s threat. Well, let me let you know that there are targets for us in the sea in which we can target it.
Let me mention a couple. The last point you said about the final points that Nasrallah said. So I've got them here. Perfect. All right. So he goes. He said how he ends the speech, escalating it. So he says, so there's U.S. warships on the Lebanese border, and he says what you'd expect him to say. Those who defeated you, there's a quote. Those who defeated you in the early 1980s are still alive, and with them today are their children and grandchildren. Is that the quote, Harino? The one about the 1980s?
Yes.
I found it.
Yeah, that
Yeah, cool. I found it by accident, but I found it because I want to post that out and link it to ask if it's related to the embassy. So I'll do that afterwards. Let me respond to Ziad. So Ziad, when in his comments relating to the warship, said we have made preparations for the American ships, and we ask America to remember their defeats in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. So he's made preparations. So he's just warning them not to get involved. America has sent us, and remember that's strategic because he doesn't want public support for U.S. intervention, especially after Ukraine. People in the U.S. don't want their military to get involved in more conflicts. America has sent us a message that they will bomb Iran if we continue. How dare you threaten our resistance? Your ships in the Mediterranean don't scare us, and be sure that we made preparation for them. So yeah, maybe he is threatening very heavily there, but it seems he's threatening because there's the risk of it getting involved, Iran getting attacked. So he's drawing the red line as Iran. I assure the Americans in case of a regional war, their ships and the Air Force will pay a heavy price. So these are the three comments that he considered escalating. Well, right after he says, our battle has not reached the stage of victory by knockout, but we are winning with points. On the horizon, we are fighting a battle of steadfastness. Our battle has not reached the stage of victory by knockout, and we still need time, but we are winning. We must work for Gaza to be He's saying we are winning. We work for Gaza to be victorious and for resistance to be victorious in Gaza. So for him to call this winning, that basic tit for tat, and for him to talk about being patient and winning by points and not knockout, does not show escalation to me. And then if you link that to his comments about the warships, well, he's saying don't cross the line of Iran, which I think we'd all agree this is a red line for Hezbollah, along with Lebanon. That's my take on that last point you've made, Ziad.
Well, for him, Mario, a victory would mean the following. At the current situation within the Arab world, there is a huge discussion about what is the right way when speaking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and what is the way of solving it. From one side, you're seeing what is called the moderate Sunni countries that were trying to push for something diplomatically. God knows what kind of details in it. And from the other side, you have those who are directing the speech of saying that only resistance can get us results. Now, what he's speaking about when speaking about victory is that we all know after this war ends, and I doubt, Zev, I can't agree with you about the fact that Israel will move forward with this operation until Hamas is eliminated, because I can't just understand how can it be eliminated. For him, he knows that after there would be a ceasefire, there was never, by the way, any kind of an end of war in all of the former rounds of battles between both sides. It always ended as a ceasefire, and he knows that.
It's a little bit different this time, though. I just, if you're speaking to me, it's a little bit different. Yeah, go ahead, then I'll respond. Go ahead.
You can get my idea. From his side, if would be a ceasefire, then with the huge pressure inside Israel now to make an exchange of prisoners as soon as possible, because for this at this time you have more than 200 Israelis captured in Gaza, and they managed to liberate more than 9,000 to 10,000 Palestinian prisoners into Gaza, or I don't know, to a third country. This would be a victory that the axis of resistance countries would say, you saw what happened. We paid the price, but we get 9,000 prisoners out of prison that you all lost hope of getting them out. Then he also believes that if he can shift the public opinion within the Arab world to believe again that his strategy, Hamas strategy, God knows strategy, and I can't in any way see a disconnection between both sides, because we all know, just 2 months ago there were threats to assassinate Saleh al-Aruri in Lebanon.
Who's
and
Saleh?
Hezbollah
Who's
sent
Saleh
a direct-
Haruri?
He's the second real chief in command of Hamas when speaking about the political wing, not Khalid Mashhad, who was sent to retirement a long time ago. When there were threats by Israel to
He is
assassinate,
the commander of the terror groups in Judea and Shomron.
yeah, well, you can say that from an Israeli point of view. So when there were threats to assassinate Saleh al-Haruri, Hezbollah and Nasrallah made direct, clear message sent out that if Saleh is assassinated on Lebanese soil, there will be a very harsh response from Hezbollah. And he's the reason that he got the protection to stay until today, plus Ziad Nakhala, who are both present in Lebanon. And
let me go to Intel.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead, Zev, and then we'll go to Intelli Times.
Well, no, just really quickly. So, Ziad, what was my point that you disagreed with?
Salah Haruri was picture
No,
himself.
Intelli, just Rega, Ziad, what was my point that you disagreed with? You said that you disagreed with the point that I made.
The destruction of Hamas.
The elimination of Hamas, because they have listened. The Gallant's last statement just 1 hour ago, he said, and I think this came in response to Hezbollah, that we have no interest in it unless he's trying to do some kinds of tactics for a pre-attack that you mentioned before. But his last statement on Channel 12 was that we have no interest in escalating the situation with Lebanon, but if they escalate from their side, we will respond. This is the only thing I heard. Now, politically speaking, Zev, and you're following up with the situation within Israel.
Yeah, but I still don't know what point you were trying to rebut that I made.
The world pressure on Netanyahu with the now thousands...
That has no, hold on. The world pressure on Netanyahu has absolutely zero bearing on Netanyahu's calculation, because even today, Anthony Blinken came out and said, we are not pushing for a ceasefire. What they're pushing for is a temporary 12-hour
trucks.
pause.
But you're saying that the world pressure has no impact on Netanyahu?
Yeah, insofar as actual,
there's things that there's no one.
No, Mario, you have to let me finish. You have to let me finish. So just 1 moment. So, of course, aid and things like that. Of course, that will go into the calculation. But in terms of a truce or a ceasefire, or some in the U.S. Democratic side of the Senate, Dick Durbin and Murphy, what they're saying, you have to recalculate. That's not going to happen, right? Because even Anthony Blinken, the most that he's pushing for is a temporary 12-hour pause. Nothing more, nothing less. And the difference this time between eliminating Hamas in the second Intifada, for example, is the number of victims, right? 1,400 people. So I hear what you're saying. I fundamentally disagree with it for a lot of reasons. But there's not going to be any, we'll go this far, but not all the way. Hamas, you can't kill the ideology, but you can kill the fighters of Hamas.
I do want to go to Alex. Alex, I have a quick question for you, just related to something. I'm not sure who's speaking, but just I want to go back to the alert by the US. Alex, you've always given us context on whenever we get an alert. So in this case, I'll read it out for you from the State Department. The State Department recommends, that's another one, we've had a few of them already. The State Department recommends that US citizens in Lebanon leave now while commercial flights remain available due to the unpredictable security situation. We've had that before. We have it again now. Available flight options at the airport. They put a link. Have a plan of action for crisis situations that does not rely on U.S. government assistance. The best time to leave the country is before a crisis, if at all possible. U.S. military-assisted evacuations of civilians from a foreign country are rare. There's no guarantee that the U.S. government will evacuate private U.S. citizens and their family members in a crisis situation. Your thoughts?
I think it's exactly as they're stating it, and for a couple of reasons. If they've got a specific threat, they'll mention that there's terrorist threats or something along those lines. That's the impetus for it. But what's clear in the statement is that it is uncertainty. And as we mentioned earlier when we were going through, the potential for still an escalation, like I said, I think Hezbollah as an organization is still incredibly, strong. I went through, their military capabilities they've got. They've obviously fought a war with Israel before. This is not anything new. The speech I thought was weak in itself, but that's not a reflection of the organization or its capabilities. There is still a potential for a flashpoint. Like I said, this is still the beginning of the urban battle. We're just starting to go into Gaza City. This is nowhere near done. There's still too many variables that this could still flash. I think the tensions are a little bit less than they were after the speech. Whether that was by design, I would think so. Like someone was mentioning, I think it was Hala. Nasrallah is not a moron. His words are chosen carefully and for a reason. So there was purpose behind what he said. So that's the security situation that speaks to that. The second piece of it, just to give it to you honestly, the U.S. government was not particularly happy, after the Afghan withdrawal. It was a mess. There's still 2,000 volunteers, civilians, veterans, everybody else who are still working around the clock because we still have 100,000 interpreters left behind, and loud and obnoxious. And it was not particularly, a moment they were super proud of. So I think part of this is genuine messaging to get people out. Also, I think they're also still saying, hey, you need to leave while you still can. And then afterwards, if something were to happen, guys, we told you to get out and you didn't leave. Don't expect us to come in and do that. And while there was a non-combatant evacuation operation in 2006, traditionally, that's, as it states, non-combatants evacuated off the battlefield. And that's usually a battlefield in almost every case that the party who's doing the evacuation is not a party to the conflict. If, God forbid, this kicks off and it escalates and, Hezbollah ends up, fully committing, and there's a response from Israel and it's, overwhelming with the rockets and the U.S. gets involved, then the U.S. ends up, if it's a protector for Israel in the sense that they get overwhelmed, it's now a party to the conflict in that sense, right? So it's not going to be the neutral U.S. forces on the ground in Lebanon evacuating people like they did in 2006. It's a very different context. So there's more variables this time.
Do you think for them to put another alert, is that common or does that concern you?
I think, it's only common in the sense that they'll put it out if it's needed, right? I think what they're telling us through these messages is that they still believe the situation is unpredictable. Nobody's coalesced around the fact that this is not going to happen and it's okay to sit there in Beirut and have, coffee on the sidewalk. Like, they're still very much concerned that this could spiral out of control and that there's still a lot of uncertainty, as the message states, which I think is a reflection of reality. The number of actors that you have involved here, think about it, right? Any of the militias in Iraq, if they decide to really, hammer one of the U.S. bases with or without permission, that ends up killing a lot of U.S. troops, could be a severe response from the U.S. on that side. If, one of the Hezbollah rockets goes across and kills a boatload of Israeli troops, or vice versa, if there's counter battery fire going to Hezbollah, into Lebanon, that there's a lot of people who die, that could also be a big problem, right? What happens, inside Gaza City with the fighting that's going, the humanitarian situation in South Gaza, that's Israel, Hamas, the United States, Hezbollah, militias in Iraq, the Iraqi government, Syria, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and the Iranians. That is a lot of separate parties, all with similar but competing interests in some cases, with potential flashpoints. So that's why this is still so dangerous, and that's why I think they're using the word uncertainty.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
But by all means.
I want to ask two questions about things happened before. Why do the U.S. government just updated the embassy in Lebanon and make it more secure, more defense?
When was that?
And it cost 2 years ago, and it ends up 2 months ago. They just finished the renovation and the building up. It is a very huge embassy. It's the hugest embassy in the Middle East and in the world for the U.S. government.
Mm-hmm.
It happens here in Lebanon, in Aukar. Is this a sorry?
That's okay.
Is this a consequences? Coincidence? Sorry, a little bit cold here.
That's sorry. Yeah. What's the?
The other question.
Let's do one first question, if you don't mind. Alex, do you understand the question?
I can answer. I do understand what he's asking, and I would love to tell you that there was some sort of strategic genius on the part of the U.S., but we also spent $1 billion building the largest embassy in Iraq that sits half empty at this point. So not exactly something we always do well, and that construction would have started and the planning for that long before this would have happened, but it's probably a reflection of an updated security assessment that says we need something bigger or better. So I think there is a connection there, but not necessarily tied to what's going on.
And Alex, it's very important to note that the first rule of government spending is always, why have one when you can have two at 3 times the price?
Yeah, people ask why we make stupid decisions on behalf of governments. I just tell them it's mostly tradition at this point.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sense of this alert, and I always try. So things like this, like security alert by the State Department, or movements on the ground, troop movements on the ground, are the things I try to look out for to try to guess. The speech by Nasrallah, while we're analyzing it, while it's important, I don't think it's as important as movements on the ground. So if Hezbollah is moving more troops to the border, it means something is up. That's, for me, it's more important of an indicator than what he says.
Yes.
So conclusion in one sentence, Alex, before we go to Exumus and Vladimir. Conclusion in one sentence. Now that there's another alert, does that change things in any way, or things remain as they were a few hours ago in your mind?
Well, I think it's the U.S. signaling that there's still the level of uncertainty that even after the speech, that's still no guarantee that nothing is going to flash off at this point, and there's still a potential risk in the future. And they're asking people to leave while flights are still available because if Israel's history of hitting the airports remains true, or if there's a large rocket barrage that's going to close the airspace, and then you got a problem. So very short answer. There's still uncertainty. The U.S. government is signaling there's uncertainty. While the speech,
but why, if there's sorry, Alex, sorry for pressing for this too much. If there's uncertainty,
go ahead.
Why a new alert though? There's already an alert. Why put another one out?
Well, I mean, we just had a speech that we've all been talking about where, Hezbollah didn't come out and declare war, and whether people were expecting it or not, whatever was said is something that factors in and matters. It doesn't look like there's going to be a war. It calms down.
I can answer that, Mario.
Yeah, go ahead.
There he is.
Mario.
Please, go ahead.
So we all know the October 7th attack was a surprise. The Israeli government, the Americans, everybody is trying to make up. So the confusion you see sometimes within our own space, I guarantee you that's something that's happening within decision making, because I have been in this sort of rooms when an adversary makes a speech, you try to analyze. So if Hassan Nasrullah's aim was to confuse everybody, not to reveal anything, he has succeeded in that regard. So it shows uncertainty and confusion. They don't know what's going to happen. That's my view.
And by the way, Mario, did we discuss that one thing Al Mayadeen reported? There's a lot of EU embassies in Lebanon contacting Hezbollah to get more clarification on what Nasrallah was saying. Do you think also part of the strategy?
Sorry, Hadi, did you?
That's also very usual. As a diplomat, I've been involved in those sort of things.
Especially the French.
Embassies are trying to reach out to Hezbollah to try to understand what Nasrallah meant in his speech.
They basically want to know: Are you gonna just go to a fight or not? We need to know. This is basically what they're saying. The French usually are the ones who are closer to Hezbollah when it comes to Europeans. And they did, and Hala tweeted about, I think she has more information about what embassies exactly, but I think the French were part of it. They were contacting Hezbollah to see and some people were speculating and saying that I think this was part of Nasrallah's strategy to confuse everyone. Because I think they were worried if for the EU embassies to contact Hezbollah in Lebanon, when I say Hezbollah, not Nasrallah, I mean their politicians, to ask them what is going on, what is going to happen, trying to tell them to de-escalate and all that. I think Hala has more information about that, but it did happen. Al Mayadeen reported it.
Yeah, can you send me through the article?
Called strategic ambiguity.
Mario, they've asked, for example, what do you mean when you say all options are on the table? For example, that's one thing.
Yeah.
Hala, I'm not sure if you saw the travel alert, but before going to get your thoughts on that, Heidi, can you send me through that article? That's actually funny. And Hoshiyar, it wasn't too it wasn't too confusing of a speech. In your opinion, do you think it was confusing? We didn't get really a clear indication. I don't think it can be any clearer. Well, that's a bit foolish to be clearer.
I mean, if you look at the debate we are having here, we are human beings, policymakers, political leaders are also human beings. So people from their own backgrounds have different interpretations of different phrases and whatnot. If you want to see it as a weak speech, you could find those phrases. If you want to see it as pragmatic, preparing for a long war, you could also find phrases like that. If you want to see it as someone protecting Lebanon,
I just had explosion scene. So Ocean Defender put out explosion scene over northwestern Saudi Arabia near the Red Sea, following reports of a missile interception by Saudi air defense batteries near the border with Jordan. So near the border with Jordan, is that Yemen again?
Yemen or Iraq? Because remember they asked for air defense.
Oh, Iraq, of course. Yeah, they did. And Iraq just put out those threats yesterday and today.
And Mario, I forgot to say one thing. Remember the day before Nasrullah's speech, we talked about the fact that the Islamic resistance in Iraq have said they will escalate next week, and that's in the group of Hezbollah. Mm-hmm. He actually mentioned it in his speech. He said that the Iraqi resistance have said they will escalate. So that means he knew that, that statement was there. He mentioned it in the speech.
Hala.
Well, didn't some other country in somewhere declare war on Israel? Was it
I think
Algeria, maybe?
No, it
Algeria
was
didn't declare war. They just like made a symbolic vote. They
Okay.
they gave authority to the president. All that if they want to engage war or do any actions, you have our blessings. So that was like more symbolic
Okay.
than actual actions.
I'm trying to find the warning by the Islamic, by the I can't remember who it was. The group in Iraq that made the threats.
It was the Islamic Resistance. You published it.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to
think
find my
on the-
own tweet. I'm not keeping up.
I sent you the link, Mario, and Hara, you can comment on like the embassies thing, EU embassies in Lebanon, if you have more information.
Sorry, what was the question? I missed it.
So basically, we were talking about Al Mayadeen reporting that there are EU diplomats and embassies contacting Hezbollah to see they want to know where Hezbollah is heading and trying to make them de-escalate.
Yeah, I can read you the stuff because I had it earlier. Just bear with me a second. Basically, that several European embassies and other members, officials of the Western world were in direct contact with, obviously not with Nasrallah, but with Hezbollah yesterday. So I'm assuming officials within Hezbollah to get further clarifications, explanation, and information on the speech and certain parts of the speech and what they meant. And also, and just while I'm doing this, I'm trying to find the exact wording I had earlier, and also to find out what to discuss further what they meant by ceasefire and what it entails, and what are the options that were sort of referred to as options on the table. And that their questioning was in an interrogative way, as in like they were quite concerned and they were asking lots of questions. So, and that was reported by Al Mayadeen television. And Mayadeen television, just for context, is quite well connected with the big inner circle or senior inner circles of Hezbollah. So they get information, like they get scoops and information all the time if they need to when something big is going on.
And I can assure you 100% the French were leading those
yes,
questions.
usually it will go via something. You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. Zumis, did you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I want to address the tweet that is up there about Blinken not welcome in Iraq. First and foremost, it's very important to keep something in mind. It's elections in Iraq in about a month, and all these political parties trying to cash in on some legitimacy when it comes to the whole Israel-Palestine thing. The fact remains that Hadi al-Amri, al-Maliki, all these militia leaders, Abu Fadak, they're always constantly meeting with the U.S. ambassador, drinks tea with her every single day, every other day in Iraq. They meet with Blaschart from the United Nations. We also went some back and forth regarding the red line. Once again, I mean, the red line is obvious. Hezbollah said in Nasrallah in his speech, he said and made it very clear that his red line, well, judging unto what he said, his red line is regional escalation. Regional escalation means that if Iran is attacked, so if Iran is attacked, Hezbollah and Nasrallah will react.
And so basically, no, I think I agree with you in terms of the red line, right? Because I think the goalposts have been shifted so much. Vladimir, what are your thoughts on this, please?
Well, I think regional escalation, they don't mean the attack on Iran, because the US is not going to attack Iran. The only thing is what the US is going to do if US bases get attacked or if US soldiers getting killed, is that they're going to attack Iranian targets in Syria and Iraq. But I don't see the US doing anything in Iran. So with regional escalation, it probably means just a general situation in Gaza. And this was also one of the reasons that the Iraqi government, they postponed a conference which was co-hosted with France, and the French president that was supposed to come to Iraq. That conference is canceled now. So because they also cited like the regional situation here, and also we discussed this also in the group before about the preparations of the Iraqi army, these leaked documents that they are preparing for eventual escalation. And you also see, I think it's a good point that you mentioned the elections that are coming up soon, that there's a lot of PMF groups that are also increasing their threats because of trying to get more votes. And you not only see Shia political parties also talking about Gaza, but also some Sunni Arab parties who are also talking about Gaza. And then the only party that is not talking much about Gaza are the Kurds, which try to sort of stay neutral and don't talk too much about anything. Although the Kurdish president recently mentioned some things about Gaza, but they are quite neutral in this conflict.
Yeah, Alex, I wanted to ask you a quick question. So, in terms of these threats coming, they're vague and indirect, maybe, but towards U.S. interests or bases and so forth. And based on what we've seen so far, at what point will or would the U.S. actually retaliate in a meaningful way, more so than just a little strike here and there? At what point, what's the red line for the United States, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's kind of what we've seen, right? Like we've seen folks that were wounded. So while these were not traumatic injuries in terms of physical wounds, right? We did see traumatic brain injuries that were the result probably of blast waves from missiles or drone strikes that came in, which I think the number was about 30 or a little bit more so far. And even then, the response that we saw was only 2 US F-16s firing on, I think, 2 storage points in Syria. And I think reported afterwards from both the US and folks in Syria was that there was no casualties, right? So it wasn't necessarily symbolic, but it wasn't exactly an overwhelmingly strong response. It was, hey, knock it off, or we're going to strike back. The U.S. has a terrible habit of sitting back, taking jabs in the chin, and then at some point just overwhelmingly swinging when something happens, which is always the risk that's run. So I think unless there's a significant, unless U.S. forces are killed, or there's some sort of really complex.
But there has to be a red line,
attack.
right? I mean, there has to be a red line. I mean, so I guess let me reframe the question very briefly, then we'll move on. So, look, drones attacking this and that. I mean, if there is an attack by any aggressive nation in the region on the U.S. interest in which U.S. service members are killed, what would be the number of sustained casualties that the U.S. would be willing to accept before they actually went gun ho to I guess to borrow a statement, right? I mean, there has to be. In what capacity would it be? So if an Iranian missile or an Iranian proxy attacked a U.S. interest, a ship, a base, or something, what would be the red line? I mean, it can't. There has to be a number that is, what makes the differentiation between full-on engagement, mass aerial bombardment, or just, a slap on the wrist. Because I think thus far you've seen a slap on the wrist.
Well, I think we've seen it in both cases. We saw it in the aftermath of Qasem Soleimani's assassination, right? They launched ballistic missiles into Iraq. We didn't see any deaths in that as a result of that. We did see traumatic brain injuries that happened, right, as a result. And we're seeing the same thing happen now. And it was just by luck in both cases that nobody was killed, because if there was, you're right, what does the response look like? I think a single U.S. death out of this, and I know in gross comparison, compared to the number of Palestinians and Israelis and others that have been killed, it sounds like an absurd statement saying one. The U.S. doesn't exactly have a high casualty tolerance, and it often gets thrown in our faces by adversaries. Like in the Gulf War, I think we took 100 casualties, and after that point, the expectation is for some perfect war where there's no U.S. casualties, which is not realistic, right? I mean, I think we lost something like 8,000 troops combined in Iraq and Afghanistan over the course of 20 years, right, in both wars. And if you look at Russia and Ukraine, you've seen 100,000 on both sides in the course of 2 years alone. So it's not something that's particularly well from a U.S. domestic political perspective with troops dying. So I think the red line would be U.S. deaths or any sort of complex coordinated attack on a U.S. base that would likely draw a major response. And then the other one would be if Israel were to become overwhelmed, is what I think. With Hezbollah getting involved, right? I think you mentioned before, and even my own experience in doing the Arab-Israeli peace, and that's obviously put that aside for a second for normalization. Oftentimes, when we get the Israelis and Arabs from different countries in the room, what I'm really struck by is the fact that the comments you should get from the Israelis are, it's so nice to be able to collaborate with regional neighbors, because normally we're not able to do that because we don't speak to one another, we can't travel there, and so we're used to having to do everything on our own. So as you mentioned earlier, with the U.S. would be invited in terms of troops in the region, which wasn't. That was a U.S. deployment to try to stave off an escalation. The Israelis are used to doing stuff by themselves, but if they become overwhelmed, that's when I think you'd see U.S. forces engaging from the air and from missiles. You still wouldn't see ground troops inside Lebanon. I think those are the two red lines.
Guys,
yeah, no, and go ahead, Mario.
No, I just I don't know who pointed it out, but so Dr. Muhammad Al Jamal, he posted out a statement. If Saudi Arabia continues to intercept our missiles, Aramco and all its branches will burn again.
Is that the Houthis saying that? Ansarullah Yemen?
Yes.
Muhammad Al Jamal. Does anyone know who that is? Let me see what it says.
It's the Houthis, Mario, and they did it before. And remember,
the reason
MBS called the president of Iran right after the October 7 attack. That was to try to prevent that, because if you remember, I said Iran cannot directly hurt the US or Europe, but if they hit oil facilities, it could be a huge problem for Europe and the US, considering the sanctions on Russia for gas and oil.
Hoshar, I wanted to ask you a question about the Houthis and how this relates into the current topic. So, how much backing do the Houthis have from Iran?
Two things. First of all, this has been raised more than once in these spaces. When we talk about backing, for example, where do they get the missiles? For a while, they will give them the missiles. But now I think they just manufacture it. They've trained them. They know how to manufacture the weapons. The second is they have tried, and this is not a secret, to send them weapons directly. A lot of them were captured by the Americans. They actually gave it to the Ukrainians a while ago. The weapons that were destined for Yemen. So they're in complete alliance. I've been to a number of security conferences to Tehran. They are very, very present in Tehran.
And the reason I ask you is this: I mean, it just seems so counterintuitive and counterproductive to the stated goal. What we assume to be the goals of Hamas in launching the attack to thwart Saudi-Israeli relations. And so we opined here last week that yes, indeed, Saudi Arabia and Iran had a thawing of the relations. Right, there was a little bit of diplomacy backed by the Chinese, back and forth. Everyone was celebrating, but at the same time, it looks like Iran and its proxies are doing the exact opposite of the stated goals of Hamas, right? It looks like they have to be careful, because Saudi Arabia and Israel are going to start aligning more and more in terms of security considerations. The more missiles get fired from Yemen by the Houthis towards Israel. We heard a report that maybe Saudi Arabia shot down a missile that was bound for Israel. We don't know.
Or maybe Israel.
That's what the statement says. He
right,
says, stop shooting down all missiles.
Right, but do you see the point that I'm trying to make? It just
yes.
It's mind-boggling, right? And so the exact what we thought was the goal of maybe Iran or Hamas in trying to thwart the peace deal, you're literally pushing Israel and Saudi Arabia together. Alex, like, does that point make sense, or am I just being a little naive?
Can I mark something?
Yeah, sure. And go ahead briefly. Absolutely.
Okay, my name is Ronen from Israel, so I can point up some things from our point of view. Israel have a presence in the Red Sea, so not everything that is supposed to be USA or Saudi, it's them. Maybe it's us. We know the Red Sea. We know that there is a presence of a ship, Iranian ship, in the near Eritrea. She is supporting Yemen. She is directing Yemen. Also, Yemen is a station for supply to Hamas. So there is a lot of things around Yemen. Yemen is a proxy of Iran, and not for HEZBOLLAH. So everything that she's done now, she's doing it for Iran.
Yeah, we understand. We understand. I think what we're trying to understand is how much impact will this have on the war? And I think, Hoshar, you mentioned that them standards threaten Aramco and threaten or the Saudi oil could have a pretty big impact. Do they have the capabilities to really hit those targets?
Yeah, they did. Although Saudi Arabia and the US blamed Iran directly, they thought they were hit from Iraq because they are very close to Western Iraq. They're in Eastern Saudi, Eastern South Saudi. Yeah? But the Houthis in 2009 destroyed almost half of it, as Amir has pointed out in the group, with drones and missiles.
Fair pass. Go ahead.
Hey, I think Mario, thanks. And this is to build on some. So the Houthis are definitely raising up the level. They're talking about everything that they're trying to do with Israel. Launching missiles. They're they just put a thread out. I posted it up so you can see it. Obviously, and they're talking about the Straits and the Red Sea. And what they're talking about is, yes, we're upset about Israel, but we're going to attack the people that are backing the Zionists in Israel, i.e. the Americans. That is a red line that they're pushing. Attention's going to go there. The U.S. is going to respond very quickly at the Houthis. The last speaker was right. They're making them all inside. We can't track anything. There are 3 Iranian ships down there, and there's also 3 Chinese ships that are down there. So everybody's wondering what this power play is going to be. The Bataan is in the Red Sea right now. The Ike is just transiting the Suez Canal right now. So everybody's sort of waiting and seeing, and you're swinging at us, and the Houthis are making statement after statement after statement.
Yeah, but do you sort of see the point I was trying to illustrate, right? So it looks to me that, the more of a threat that Saudi Arabia has, be it from the Houthis or whatever, the fact that they're intercepting Israeli-bound missiles, you are literally pushing Saudi Arabia together, Saudi Arabia and Israel together, which is the last thing that Iran wanted. I mean, can somebody explain that to me? Or I'm still not being able to
I
grasp
think
that.
I can give like some context, and I think we go to Yusuf. I let him up now because he's from Yemen. He might probably has some ideas on that. I think that, and actually, that's the question I want to ask here. Some people on panel, if they can answer it, because when we had the deal with Iran and Saudi Arabia, we had a lot of people saying, okay, that means the proxies, including the Ansarullah or the Houthis, are going to be tamed now. But suddenly we don't see them tamed at all, and Saudi is still comforting with them, and Iran is not like what people are saying should give the order to make them stop. So that's also something I would like to discuss with a lot of people, how they see it, because in my view they're not proxies, but the people who call them proxies, why do they think this is still happening? And yes, I do believe if there was attacks on Aramco and all that, there will be like some intelligence between Israel and Saudi Arabia. There will be some alliances when it comes to that because they already existed before, and they don't think they hit it. For that, I would go to Yusuf and then Alex to like 2 perspectives on that. Yusuf, go ahead because you're from Yemen. If you can give us perspective on that.
Yes. Can you guys hear me fine?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, cool. All right. So first and foremost, the Houthis or Ansar Allah, they march to their own tune. And people keep calling them Iranian proxies, but that's just simply not true. The Houthis they ruled Yemen for hundreds of years. The last dynasty, the Imama, collapsed in the 1960s. It was still in existence before the Iranian Revolution, right? The family of the Houthis, who are the leaders of the Ansarullah movement, the Houthis, their ancestors date back to control in Yemen for more than 600-700 years. So the Ansarullah, it's an authentic Yemeni movement that's not a proxy of any state. People think that the Houthis are Shia. They're not Shia, they're Zaydi. And Zaydi school of thought differs tremendously with the Twelver Shia school of thought. So that's just the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is about the weapons. I think somebody asked how much weapons do the Houthis have, or what kind of weapons do they have? And the truth to that question is the previous leader, Ali Abdullah Saleh. Excuse me. This was one of the most strategic, tactical, clever leaders that ever existed, not just in Yemen. He bought a humongous stockpile of weapons from Russia before the war. Because this is before 2011, before the Arab Spring. This has been a connection between Ali Abdullah Saleh and Russia since the 1980s, where he was constantly getting weapons from Russia and hiding them, scattering them inside the mountains in different provinces. And those weapons were hidden from the actual state, the government itself, because what Ali Abdullah Saleh did, he didn't just build an army to defend, the nation of Yemen. He built an army to defend.
Yusuf, were they used in the local war, in the civil war?
Of course. Yes. Well, no, the civil war. You mean between the North and South?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he used a lot of them, but he didn't have to use the ballistic missiles and the
Can
other
they
powerful
reach?
weapons.
Can they reach Israel?
Of course, they can reach.
Despite it not, I mean, reach it not just from a physics perspective. Reach it despite Israel's the defense system.
Well, that I honestly don't know, to be honest with you. What I do know is that they have.
How would you compare them? I want to get just a bit more clarity. How would you compare their capabilities to Hamas? Sorry, to Hamas and to Hezbollah.
So first of all, these are Russian weapons, and what I know about what I've heard from the knowledge that I've gathered is that the Russian ballistic missiles and Russian rockets, they're very adaptable, meaning that they can be upgraded. They can be upgraded with the newest software to avoid detection if if that's the case, right? And what we have is the Houthis upgrading the weapons that Ali Abdullah Saleh had hidden, and we see that with the military parades. They will show some of them, not all of them. They will just show like one or two of the latest ballistic missile that was upgraded. Each military parade they show weapons that can reach longer targets than the previous parade
So
that was
just going
showing
back
it.
to the point, Yusuf, and I do want to go to other speakers. Going to the point, how much impact do you think if they decide to attack Saudi's oil? How much impact do you think that will have? Because they
That's a
did,
good
I think
question.
they did hit an oil field a few years ago.
It's gonna be simultaneously with closing the biggest weapon that the Houthis have, Ansar Allah have, is closing Bab al Mandab waterway. That's the biggest weapon because that will literally destroy half of the excuse me, the international trade and global economy, which the U.S. cannot afford
Have they
at
have the
this very
ability to shut
moment.
it down?
Of course. Well, all they have to do is just target, say that they're going to target any shipment from any of the countries supporting Israel in the Red Sea. That's all they have to do, and they literally can just fly a drone to hit any target, not a ballistic missile, a drone. And they've done that before. Just a couple 6 months ago, you had Western companies. They tried to they tried to strike a contract with the Southern separatists to buy some of the oil, whereby the Southern separatists they were selling the oil for ridiculously low price, and the Houthis they sent a drone strike near the near the transaction, which forced them to withdraw and not buy any of the oil. So
So
yes, all
let's
they
get.
have to do.
So
So
Yeah,
just my
go
last
ahead,
point. I want to
Zev.
make this
No, I
just the
do,
last point.
Zev. I do. Before
Just
another point, just a lot of points, you. So I do want to jump to just want to focus on this particular point, the impact that the Houthis could have, because now they've just threatened Saudi. Vladimir and Alex, I'd love your thoughts, and then Veripath.
And also, if they can also answer the point where to what extent Saudi and Israel might coordinate against that as well, that's interesting to know.
Sure, Vladimir, why don't you go first? I've talked a lot.
All right, go ahead, Alex. Oh, there. Vladimir, can you
Well,
unmute? Yeah, he
I'm
can.
not.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course like if the Houthis can like target the oil infrastructure in Saudi, it will also drive up the oil prices, so it will destabilize the energy market. So I think it's like a very major thing that the Houthis can do, and everybody, especially in Europe and US, are already like upset with the high fuel prices and everything, and that also the prices went up because of the Ukrainian war before. So I think they could do a lot of damage, and especially the Saudis, they don't have much. I mean, they intercepted rockets from the Houthis before, but of course they could highly escalate these attacks. And in the past also there have been some attacks from the Iraqi side, also from the PMF. So yeah, it can basically destabilize the area more and drive up the oil prices, which also like will directly hurt the economy in the US and Europe. And you see also with the Biden administration, there's a lot of Americans in this room that they don't want to have the oil prices to go up. And also the Biden administration, they didn't want to deal with the Saudis so much after the death of this journalist Khashoggi, but in the end, then the Biden administration, they were forced to visit Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia is so strategic with regarding the oil. So yeah, the Houthis, they can do a lot of damage.
Alex, go ahead.
Alex.
Sorry, fat thumb over the mute button. There's a big factor that's missing here, right? Geography. Look at where Yemen sits. If any of those missiles or rockets or drones flew over Saudi airspace or over their, territorial waters, and they allowed that to fly the length of the country or through their waters, there's a bit of not culpability, but they have the ability to shoot it down. So it's a violation of their territorial integrity as well to have those things fly over the top, right? So that's one. So I can see the Houthis being pissed off about it because they're obviously looking to target Israel. And again, if it flew over Saudi airspace and they took it down, that's what you would expect from a nation state with a integrated air defense system to take down whether it be incoming missiles, right, ballistic missiles, or whether it be hostile aircraft over the airspace. So that's what absolutely attack infrastructure in Saudi Arabia in the past. It hasn't been catastrophic, but it's been very significant in terms of the attacks. I think the Saudis, would likely, depending how big it is, would defend themselves. If we saw, what happened in response to the previous attacks, it wasn't crazy, and I don't think the Saudis are looking to escalate it, but they're certainly going to protect their territory. I was in Abu Dhabi in March for peace talks when the Iranian delegation showed up with their head of intelligence and their national security advisor to talk to the Emiratis right after the peace deal was struck between, or normalization rather, of relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran via the Chinese. And a lot of the topic of discussion that was there, from my understanding, was related to trying to wind down the situation in Yemen. So, I mean, I think Zeb's point is correct. You do have this very weird confluence of events where you have, a desire amongst all the Arab states. Nobody's looking for this to escalate into a regional conflict. That really doesn't benefit anybody. I think the statements being made are genuine. They are looking for this to stop. They wanted to stop the conflict, not have it go any further, not see any more deaths, not see any more action on what they feel is legitimate Palestinian soil that should be part of a two-state solution, and they don't want this to turn to regional conflict. So when you have the Houthis threatening to attack Saudi oil infrastructure, yeah, it does put them in a position where they are, it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend at that point, right? In terms of having to defend the infrastructure for their own, in terms of oil. Everybody's already mentioned the impact of the economy. I'm not going to go over those points, but it was correct. But yeah, you have a problem, militarily speaking, when you've got missiles being launched over Saudi airspace. They have an obligation to take it down, and I think that's what people forget.
Alex, the previous attack was really major. That was one of the reasons MBS was really angry at the US.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons he wants new security guarantees, because the US just made statements.
Yes.
And the attack was major. That's why I have mentioned it, since the beginning, that is one of the major goals, because economically it could leave a huge impact, not just on the US, even on China, So you
I think you're
have
right.
other countries, coming
I think you're right.
I think that's a really good point. Mr. Papadopoulos, welcome. It's good to see you here again. So since our previous conversations, have any of your opinions changed? What are your thoughts on recent developments?
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Thanks for having me. It's been a fascinating back and forth with everybody. So just a couple initial thoughts. I guess it's my first question is, does Hezbollah want to destroy itself to support Hamas? The answer, in my opinion, is no. And are we over-focusing on the non-state actors and forgetting the great powers? I believe so. In some of the earlier spaces, I viewed Russia as the kingmaker for how Iran and even Hezbollah would act. How Israel raids Syria in many ways goes directly through talks with Russia. This is based on discussions I've had with Israeli officials years ago, in which back then they even would host weekly consultations with the Russian Air Force regarding no-go zones, red lines, gray lines in Syria, and even potentially Lebanon. And now the reason I'm mentioning Lebanon is because Russian air defense systems are moving there, ostensibly by Wagner Group. And I think that really is a deterrent to maintain the status quo. I know some people think that this is going to escalate. I think the status quo is going to remain to limited strikes, some skirmishes in what Hezbollah views as occupied territory. And the reason I think these skirmishes are even going to continue is because it's going to be just enough to distract Israel to allow Hamas to survive as an entity the way Hezbollah did after 2006. We see what's happening around the world. There's international pressure for a ceasefire. So the longer Hamas survives, the likelier it will survive post-war. And just to qualify why I also believe this, because last year, Lebanon and Israel signed a historic maritime agreement. It would be unbecoming for Hezbollah to wage an all-out war for a third party, which is obviously Hamas, while they want to stabilize their own country. And my final point is Turkey. Turkey today decided to cut all diplomatic ties with Israel and to basically isolate Netanyahu. I still view Turkey as the
Wasn't
wild
that,
card in
I
this
thought there was
conflict.
a little bit more, sorry, Mr. Papadopoulos, I thought it was more caveated than that. Didn't they simply recall the ambassador for consultations?
Correct.
From what I...
Yeah, so no, there was a report going out, but I think they issued a clarifying statement saying that we've recalled our ambassador simply for consultations. I think that maybe that would be the next step, but I've yet to see any country in protest, including countries that have signed the Abraham Accords, that have withdrawn their ambassadors or cut diplomatic ties. I just don't see Turkey doing that. But I think that statement was made. I think
Ben, Erdogan said he won't cut ties with Israel, but he will
there you
not
go.
deal with Netanyahu.
That's exactly
Yeah,
my
and
point.
that's
He's not
fine.
dealing with Netanyahu. He's basically qualifying him as a persona non grata, somebody that he won't deal with. Netanyahu is the sitting prime minister of Israel. He's recalling the Turkish ambassador. Israel and Turkey did not have their ambassadors in their respective countries for close to a decade until their relationship began to thaw just around a year ago. So
But
this
didn't
is a
Netanyahu recall the ambassador from Turkey too? Or didn't Netanyahu do this? What didn't Netanyahu make the first move? Khoshar, I think that was true. Didn't because of the statements that Erdogan made and so forth. Did Netanyahu was not he the first to recall the ambassador to Turkey?
I think I read that news, but I'm not
Yeah,
100% sure.
yeah. Anyway, it's a side point. I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Papadopoulos. Go ahead.
May I just on this? Israel actually, the ambassador to Turkey, the Israeli ambassador to Turkey, left Turkey a few weeks ago for security reasons, quote unquote. Today, Turkey recalled their ambassador from Israel. It was not a cut of diplomatic ties; it was just a recall of the ambassador. But he did say yes that he will not deal with Netanyahu anymore.
But what do you want to? I mean, it's like comparing, semantics at this point. You recall an ambassador, but then you
No,
do not basically
I
recognize
don't
agree.
think
I
it's.
agree.
it's
I'm just saying what it is. That's all.
it's a big deal. It's a big deal if the president of Turkey is openly first condemning Israel as a quote unquote terrorist state. Secondly, to refer them to the ICJ, and now to essentially say that we do not recognize the Israeli prime minister. This is a significant escalation by NATO's second largest military and a country that the United States has actually invested a lot of diplomatic capital in trying to repair their relationship since it, basically reached a nadir in 2010 after the Mavi Marmara incident. So, like I mentioned, we did see the meeting at the UN General Assembly between Netanyahu and Erdogan just about 3 weeks ago, shortly before the attack by Hamas. There was open discussion about them cooperating in the fields of security, energy, and tourism. Now we have Turkey hosting rallies in Istanbul with hundreds of thousands of people, many of which are Islamists, calling for Turkish soldiers to go into Jerusalem. Now, I'm not saying that's what Erdogan is saying, but you have actual rival parties, leadership in Turkey, calling for a military intervention in Israel to support the Palestinians. So this is not a, this isn't a normal situation. And most importantly, I think besides the saber rattling or even this heated rhetoric by Erdogan in Turkey, is if the reports by U.S. intelligence are indeed confirmed that Wagner Group is now sending air defense systems into Lebanon. This is also a very significant deterrent now for the Israelis not to actually bomb or invade Lebanon in the event that Hezbollah does begin to launch further missiles into Israel, something that I believe they won't do. But we have to really focus. I think this entire conversation has really been so much about Hamas and Hezbollah, which is important, but we haven't spoken as much about what Turkey and Russia are doing in the background, and I think that's very important here.
I actually agree that Turkey and Russia might be playing a bigger role than we all think, and we should focus on who they have influence on and the sub-influence they have as well in the region. How can they escalate things or de-escalate things, especially Turkey, to be honest, at this point, because they when his speech was done. I mean, I personally believe Erdogan is just a populist. He always say these kind of statements and all,
Yeah.
but he also these aggressive statements towards Israel, what they call a terrorist state, and then he called Hamas a resistance and all that. Personally, I do believe that he's just a populist. He's just saying words, but you never know to what extent he might go as well. I don't see that, but it's good to discuss that.
And I'll also just mention one thing. I think I mentioned it. What the raids Israel conducts in Syria, whether it's bombing raids or infiltrating Syria with ground operations, that really has to go through Russia. Russia is
Absolutely.
a de facto kingmaker now in Syria and potentially in this part of the world militarily. Of course, now you have the Turkish influence in Syria, the American troop, positioning there as well. You have the Kurdish question. So this is something that I think people are not focusing on because the attention with Russia has been in Ukraine. Now, of course, with the reports about a peace agreement in the works between Russia and Ukraine with the U.S. backing some sort of agreement to assure that the United States does not get bogged down in a potential 2 or 3 front war. I think now the focus, once that is settled, is going to be more so on what Russia really is doing in the Eastern Mediterranean. Of course, they have their naval base at Tartus in Syria. They're developing offshore gas and oil in Syria. And like I just mentioned, we don't know if the reporting is true or not, but if Wagner Group has decided to actually deliver anti-defense systems to Hezbollah, this is now a moment that we have not seen before, and it really sucks Russia in with a potential new front with the United States, France, and the UK in the Eastern Mediterranean, like we saw in the proxy war in Ukraine. So that's really how I see the situation
George, I have a question
evolving.
for you since we're talking about Russia, and there were been talks in Lebanon about that. I think they're far fetched, but you never know. We have this gas thing happening in Lebanon in the south, and Russia had its eyes on the gas in the west, the same thing, and the French companies, and they've been like fights. And even Turkey, after the explosion, they had this like influence fight with them and the French. And I think the Prime Minister of Turkey visited Beirut a few days later, and then Macron visited. So they had this fight because of the gas thing, I think. Do you think that Russia might play a role in the de-escalation part? I don't see them, of course, controlling Hezbollah or anything. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if they want to put some influence in some ways, which probably can't. Do you think it has anything to do with the gas in South Lebanon?
Look, Lebanon is sitting on a bonanza of natural gas. The entire region is actually sitting on over 122 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, which is really enough to supply European demand for around 50 years. So we're talking about, and Europe is the largest consumer of natural gas. So you could understand what Egypt, Cyprus, Lebanon, and Israel are now sitting on, and why this new corridor has been really developed. And you see these multinational corporations now investing so heavily to make this an alternative route and source of energy supply away from Russia, because as we all understand, the situation between Russia and Ukraine has really destabilized European energy security, which is an American priority in order to sustain the transatlantic alliance. We also see alternative resources coming onshore in Azerbaijan. There's a new pipeline from Azerbaijan through Turkey into Europe via Greece and Italy. So the situation now with Lebanon is interesting because Russia, as I mentioned, is developing gas and oil offshore Syria. Syria is essentially is controlled now by the Russian military and by Russian oil companies. In the south of that, in Lebanon, it's more interesting because you have Western multinational companies. You have Total, which is the largest French energy company, investing heavily in Lebanon. You have discussions of Chevron, a major American energy company, now seeking to get involved there the way they are in Israel and Egypt. BP is interested now in the region. So with all of these factors involved, I think that is the key reason why Hezbollah is very reticent to actually allow any outside forces or factors, including Russia or even Iran, to allow them to get sucked into a potential regional war. Well, at the end, Hezbollah has the most to lose out of anybody. Hamas and Gaza are in an impoverished situation. They're in a no man's land. Lebanon has seen its dire straits. It has the potential to revitalize its economy by developing these resources. So I think actually they're stuck between a hard rock and a hard place. They see an enemy to the south with Israel. However, they did sign this agreement last year to recognize each other's maritime boundaries. There are Western companies involved in Lebanon, and these are all factors that we can't ignore. And I think this is the main reason why Hezbollah and Nasrallah was so calculating in his speech yesterday, and why he made it clear that while we do condemn this, don't put all the blame on us. Don't make us get sucked into this when all the other Arab countries in the region are just sitting back doing nothing. And I think that really is part of this.
Can I weigh in here, Mario?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Habiba.
go ahead, Habiba, and
Yeah,
you
hey
go with
guys.
Vladimir.
Yeah, so I spoke to the Turkish side today in government, and again I spoke to them. I've been speaking to them. So last week they told me military options were off the table, remember, and economic trade and economic trade and tourism sanctions were on the table. And then you saw the announcements today. So what was it? Is it George?
Yeah, George.
Yeah, so I think unfortunately I think you've mischaracterized its whole approach towards Russia, because if you look at the two big things, two big battle spaces that it was fighting, literally contesting in the last few years, that I was working on with them. You look at, obviously northern Syria and then the Caucasus, where they pushed Russian influence way back, because the Russian side were opposed to the Turkish side, right? The Russians were sponsoring the Armenian side and whatnot, and obviously Turkey was sponsoring the Azeri side. So what you've seen is the pushback of Russian influence and the pushback of Iranian influence, which is what they're concerned with. So they're not working, and actually they were very skeptical about Iranian kind of exploitation of the conflict. So that's what they have in common with all of the Gulf states, is they are worried about kind of Iranian exploitation of the conflict, and it's a really serious fear. So
I think that Russia and Turkey are cooperating a lot more than how you just characterized it. I mean, at the end, Turkey is the only NATO member which has not sanctioned Russia after its war of aggression against Ukraine. There's a tremendous energy deals. Russia is building nuclear plants in Turkey. They're cooperating in Syria for their own red lines. And quite frankly, regarding the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, I think it was actually in Russia's interest to allow Armenia to lose and Azerbaijan to win. It wasn't a zero-sum situation simply because Turkey was supporting Azerbaijan. Aliyev in Azerbaijan is a very close ally of Putin, and they have their own dealings that they're working on regarding the various natural gas deliveries to Europe. So I disagree regarding
Again, like when
this
you
is
say
zero sum.
cooperate, I think you're looking at it through the wrong lens. So if you look at the Turkish security guarantor proposal that the Turks have continually talked about for the last 2 weeks relative to Gaza, that's the key thing you've got to be looking at, and what we're working on right now, right? Is to what extent can Turkey weigh in with the Gulf countries to secure Palestinian self interests in the wake of this conflict? So again, like when we're talking about that, that they had a deconfliction of the space in northern Syria while their proxies were still fighting Russia, right? So it's an incredibly tough balancing act that people don't really understand. So on one hand, they have a security and multilateral framework by which they fend off Russian interests, and at the same time they managed to deconflict both spaces, which no other party was able to do, right? And at the same time, they have got proxy kind of battles going on at the same time that they're sponsoring. So it's been an incredibly fine line that they've had to navigate, and also, like you said, Russian interests in Turkey. So they've been, having to contend with Russian and Iranian kind of influence over Turkey for some time, and it's been a kind of a tough battle. But in terms of the the security guarantor proposal, that's the most serious thing that everyone's kind of working on right now. So the meetings that happened today with in Amman were really significant, because and you had such strong language for the Jordanian side, and again they're all kind of united in lockstep in calling for a ceasefire, and this is what people are working on. But there is going to need to be cooperation, greater cooperation. They've never cooperated to this extent across this bloc. So Zev, you were talking about kind of to what extent Saudi and Israel and everyone want to cooperate with each other to fend off Iran, but it's to understate the anger towards Israel over the treatment of Palestinians, and that is and you can see it in all of their statements. It's almost
Well, I see
uh,
it differently. I don't see
yeah.
that coming from the Saudi statements. I see a little bit of, typical Saudi statements, but I don't view the Saudi statements as very harsh. If anything, I view it differently, right? And again, I will come back to the point that I believe that each sovereign nation within the Middle East will always do what's best for its sovereign, the population within its borders. And I think that Saudi Arabia has made the calculation that, and they protest and they can raise some issues with Israel. I think that they've just decided that it's probably in their best interest to align with Israel, and
No, so I
I
spoke to the Saudi side.
well, so I spoke to the no, Habib, I spoke to the Saudi side too. Like, I'm not
Okay,
trying to be
hold on.
rude, but
So let's
no, no, no,
qualify
no,
this.
no, no.
So let's
Okay, we
qualify,
don't need to
right? Let's
qualify it. I'm
qualify.
saying that you can't say that I spoke to the Saudi side. You don't speak to the people who are speaking in an official capacity, because the
No,
people who are
I
speaking.
am.
Well, you're not, Habib. If they, you
Ben,
can't say
just
I.
let me ask her a
Let her
question
Yeah.
respond.
Sure.
on that. Let me ask you a question. She can respond
Yeah.
also with my question. It's
Go ahead.
specific to that. So, Habiba, I want to ask you. Saudi has two options. I mean, I don't agree with Ben on one thing, that the statements were not harsh. They were harsh, especially from the foreign ministry. They were blaming Israel for everything. But Israel has two options. Either they go with their new with their new treaty with Iran, and talk them out and talk about how they can deal with the Ansarullah in Yemen missiles and all that, or they're gonna have to go on this by themselves, and they won't go by themselves. They most likely will try to do some coordinations with Israel, and we've seen reports on that. They've been doing that in Yemen as well. So I don't see why wouldn't they do it again. So that's what I want to
So
say.
you've got to pay attention to what Alex said about deterrence, right? So the whole bloc is on high alert in terms of, because what they're mainly worried about is proxy attacks and rogue actors and actors like Hezbollah that you saw today. Those are the things that we're really worried about. So what Alex talked about in terms of deterrence, where the US has bolstered deterrent capacities, with, on Houthi missiles and all those kind of things, that's the battle space as far as like how people are going to deter and fend off kind of Iranian proxy attacks, and that is a serious concern. Does it mean that that the Abraham Accords are full swing? Absolutely not. As someone characterized it earlier, I think at Carnegie, they said it's a deep freeze, and I think that's really accurate. That there's an urgent need across all parties, and again, been speaking to them. They're desperately intent on the humanitarian situation more than anything, and wanting to implement a ceasefire. The Abraham Accords are kind of, it's not dead in the water, but it's just there's so much anger from the governments themselves at what Israel is doing.
I think on that. You go ahead, Tev.
No, so I can get behind what she said, but and it's just my own policy. I will base my my thoughts and my opinions what comes out of official diplomatic channels, and the only thing that I've heard, and yes, of course they're criticizing Israel, but it's not. I've not heard a Saudi yet say no, the normalization is dead or anything like that, and quite to the contrary. I heard a Saudi prince today, and the prince is not going to speak without the blessing of the of his superiors, to saying that look, there is no axis of resistance, that's dead, that's basically a myth. So I think it's a complex issue, and it's not for this space right now, but absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I also don't believe that the normalizations are dead, to be honest. But it might happen in the future. But when it comes to the axis of resistance, Saudi Arabia was always against the axis. So that specific part is not new. They're always been against the axis of resistance. They didn't believe in it.
Do you guys think the Houthis will make much of a difference to the war?
No.
I personally think they could, if they take it to an extent where they can actually fire something harmful, and like Yusuf said, close the, what do you call it, the crossing of the sea next to Yemen. What's it called? Hormuz.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if they can go to that extent and close it, you might see more international pressure on where things go. And if they're gonna attack Saudi Arabia, I think this is just a threat, and they did it before. But when they did it before, there was a war happening between Saudi Arabia and the Yemenis. It's not like now, if you intercept a missile, we're just gonna attack your Aramco bases. So if they actually do that, things might escalate to another level. My personal opinion, and there will be more pressure from a lot of sides to where things go in the war.
It's just crazy. It's crazy how dynamic this is. How it's just changing on a day-to-day basis. Like we started the space not knowing about this threat towards Saudi, and now we're talking about this being the highlight. We started the space talking about the Hezbollah speech, and then we shifted to we talked about the US alert, and then now we're focusing on the Houthis. We talked about the group in Iraq as well and the threats they've made. And there's also the rocket that fell in the dead. There's another one that was heading to. Is there another one today? I'm very tired. That's why I'm ending space.
But it didn't fall. It didn't fall into the Dead Sea. It
got intercepted. Yeah, it got intercepted. But is there another one today again?
Over Jordan.
That's the one from today was from Yemen.
Okay, that's the one that got intercepted over Saudi, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, over Saudi or by Saudi.
They said by Saudi and the US, so I'm not sure who exactly.
All right. Anyway, my team will keep posting 24/7 all the updates on my account. We do need to rest. I think we're all exhausted after the last few days. I should have started the space earlier. We'll start tomorrow's one a bit earlier, so we got time. Let us know your thoughts as well in the comments. How do you think the space went? Any questions that we should ask tomorrow? And mainly your thoughts on the war in general. I'm going to go through the comments as I head to bed. Appreciate the panelists. Appreciate the co-hosts. Let's all get some rest. Thank you, everyone.
Take care, Mario. Thanks.